Narrator in the fog-choked streets of 1929 London. A terrified woman whispers a chilling prophecy to Hercule Poirot. Her death is coming, and it's justice. But why does she beg him not to hunt her killer, when 3 bodies are found in the opulent Bloxham Hotel, each with a monogrammed cufflink marked PJI in their mouths? Poirot's little grey cells ignite. Is this a ritual of revenge, a conspiracy from a forgotten past, or a mastermind's deadly game? Unravel the secrets of the Monogram Murders, where every clue hides a lie, and every lie hides a killer. Chapter 1. The Frightened Woman. The gas lamps of London flickered like hesitant stars against the November chill of 1929, casting a soft glow through the fog that curled around St. Martin's Lane. Inside Pleasance Coffee House, the air was warm, redolent with the scent of roasted beans and buttery scones, a haven from the damp streets. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective with a moustache as precise as a geometric theorem, sat at his usual corner table, his eyes half closed in contentment. His evening ritual cup of tisane, a plate of delicate almond biscuits, and the quiet hum of his thoughts was a sacred pause in a world too often disordered. Poirot adjusted the angle of his cup, ensuring it sat at precisely 90 degrees to the table's edge. Order, he believed, was the foundation of clarity, and clarity was the key to unraveling the human heart's tangled motives. He was not expecting a case tonight, only the gentle pleasure of solitude. But fate, as Poirot often mused, had a way of disrupting even the most meticulously planned evenings. The door of the coffee house swung open with a jangle of the bell, admitting a gust of cold air and a woman who seemed to carry the night's unease with her. She was young, perhaps with auburn hair pinned haphazardly beneath a cloached hat that had seen better days. Her coat, a faded green, clung to her slender frame, and her eyes wide, darting. The color of storm clouds scanned the room with a desperation that made Poirot's fingers pause over his biscuit. She hesitated at the threshold, her gloved hands twisting together as if wrestling an invisible foe. Then, with a sudden resolve, she crossed the room, her steps uneven, and stopped before Poirot's table. The other patrons a pair of clerks debating politics. An elderly woman knitting in silence paid her no mind. But Poirot felt the air shift, as if a storm were brewing in the quiet. "Monsieur," she whispered, her voice trembling like a leaf caught in the wind. "Are you Hercule Poirot, the detective?" Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes sharp beneath their hooded lids. "I am he, mademoiselle, and you are in distress, I perceive. Please, sit. The tisane is excellent here, and it calms the nerves." She glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting pursuit, then sank into the chair opposite him. Up close, her face was pale, her lips chapped, and a faint bruise shadowed her left cheek, partially hidden by a smear of powder. "I haven't much time," she said, her words tumbling out. "My name is Jenny Hobbs. I need your help, but not in the way you think." Poirot raised an eyebrow, his moustache twitching with curiosity. The ways of Poirot's thinking are many. Mademoiselle, tell me your trouble, and we shall see which way is best." Jenny leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I'm going to die, Monsieur Poirot, soon, perhaps tonight, and when I do, I beg you do not seek my killer. Let them go. My death, it will be justice." The words hung between by them, heavy as the fog outside. Poirot's fingers tightened around his cup, his mind racing. This was no ordinary plea. The woman's eyes held not just fear, but resignation, a strange certainty that chilled him more than the November air. "Justice," he repeated, his tone measured. "Mademoiselle, you speak as if your death is a debt to be paid. Explain, s'il vous plaît." Jenny's hands shook as she clutched her coat. "I can't. I've said too much already. If you're the man they say one who sees what others miss, then you'll understand when it happens. But promise me, Monsieur Poirot, promise you won't hunt them. Swear it." Poirot leaned back, his gaze unwavering. "Hercule Poirot does not make promises lightly, mademoiselle, nor does he allow mysteries to pass unchallenged. Why do you believe your death is imminent? Who threatens you?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away fiercely. "I've done things, terrible things, years ago. I thought I could escape, but they've found me. The past, like a shadow you can't outrun. I saw him tonight, outside my lodging, watching. He didn't speak, but I knew. The monogram. It's a sign. Monogram." Poirot's voice sharpened, his interest now ablaze. "What monogram, mademoiselle?" Jenny's lips parted, then closed. She shook her head, rising abruptly. "I shouldn't have come. Forgive me. Just let it be." Before Poirot could protest, she turned and hurried toward the door, her coat flapping like a wounded bird's wings. The bell jangled again, and she was gone, swallowed by the fog. Poirot sat motionless, his tiresome forgotten. The word monogram echoed in his mind, a single thread in a tapestry yet to be woven. He disliked loose threads. They offended his sense of order. Rising, he adjusted his hat and coat, paid his bill with a precise nod to the waitress, fee, spring, and stepped into the night. The streets of London were a labyrinth of shadows, the fog muffling sounds and blurring edges. Poirot's polished shoes clicked against the cobblestones as he retraced Jenny's likely path, his eyes scanning for clues. She had mentioned a lodging and a man watching her. A threat, a monogram, a plea not to pursue justice. These were not the ravings of a hysteric, but the fragments of a puzzle. And Hercule Poirot was a man who assembled puzzles with unmatched precision. He paused at a corner, where a street lamp cast a sickly glow. A scrap of paper lay crumpled in the gutter, its edge caught by the wind. Poirot bent, retrieving it with a gloved hand. It was a tram ticket, dated that day, stamped for a route near Covent Garden. On its back, scrawled in hasty pencil, were the letters P.J.I., a monogram, perhaps. His pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. Jenny Hobbs had left a breadcrumb, intentional or not, tucking the ticket into his pocket. Poirot continued, his mind mapping the possibilities. Jenny's fear suggested a pursuer, but her plea for inaction hinted at guilt, a debt she believed her death would settle. The monogram PJI was a cipher, a signature perhaps, but whose victims? A killer's, or something else entirely. As he approached Covent Garden, the fog thickened, and the sounds of the city grew distant. A sudden clatter broke the silencer. Tin can kicked across the pavement. Poirot turned, his hand tightening on his cane. A figure stood at the mouth of an alley, half hidden in shadow. Tall, broad-shouldered, the man wore a flat cap pulled low, his face obscured. He didn't move, but his presence was a weight, a silent challenge. "Monsieur Poirot," called, his voice calm but carrying the authority of one accustomed to command. "You observe me, I think. Step forward, and let us converse like civilized men." The figure hesitated, then turned and vanished into the alley. Poirot considered pursuit, but dismissed it. The fog was too dense, the risk too great. Instead, he noted the alley's location near a shuttered bakery and resolved to investigate further in daylight, returning to his lodging at Whitehaven Mansions. Poirot found his friend Edward Catchpool, a young Scotland Yard inspector, sprawled in an armchair, a glass of whiskey in hand. Catchpool was a contrast to Poirot, tall, dishevelled, with a boyish earnestness that belied his sharp mind. Their shared lodging was an arrangement of convenience, born of Poirot's temporary retirement, bile, and Catchpool's need for a mentor. "You're late, Poirot," Catchpool said, yawning. "Don't tell me you've been chasing ghosts in the fog." "Not ghosts, mon ami," Poirot replied, removing his coat with care. "A woman, most frightened, and a mystery that begins to unfold. Tell me, have you heard of a monogram, PJI, in your police work?" Catchpool frowned, setting down his glass. "PJI? No, nothing comes to mind." "Why?" Poirot recounted Jenny's visit, her cryptic warning, and the tram ticket. Catchpool's brow furrowed further. "Sounds like she's running from something or someone. Could be a domestic matter, or blackmail. Did she give you anything solid?" "Solid, non Poirot admitted, but intriguing. The monogram, is a clue, I am certain. And her plea not to seek her killer is most unusual. It suggests a crime already planned, or a guilt she carries." Catchpool rubbed his chin. "I'll check the Yard's files for Jenny Hobbs and that monogram. But Poirot, you know how these things go. Half the time, it's a lover's quarrel or a bad debt." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "And the other half, mon ami, it is murder, or worse. Tomorrow we visit the alley near the bakery, and we find Mademoiselle Hobbs before her prophecy fulfills itself." The next morning, the fog had lifted, leaving London crisp and clear. Poirot and Catchpool studied the mouth of the alley, the shuttered bakery looming beside them. The air smelled of stale bread and coal smoke. Poirot's keen eyes swept the ground, noting scuff marks in the dirter man's boot, size 10, perhaps, and a smaller print, possibly Jenny's dot. At the alley's end, tucked behind a crate, Poirot found a glove green, like Jenny's coat, with a faint stain that might have been blood. He held it up, his expression grave. This, Catchpool, is no accident. Mademoiselle Hobbs passed this way, and she was not alone. Catchpool took the glove, his jaw tightening. If she's in danger, we need to move fast. I'll get the yard to canvass the area for her lodging. Covent Garden's not that big, Bean Poirot said, his voice firm. But we must also inquire at Pleasant's coffee house. The waitress, Fee Spring, she observes much. She may know more of Jenny's habits. They returned to the coffee house, where Fee Spring, a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a quick tongue, was wiping tables. Jenny Hobbs, she said, pausing. She's been in a few times. Always looks like she's expecting the devil himself to walk through the door. Last night she was worse kept, looking out the window, muttering about someone waiting for her. Did she mention a name? Poirot pressed. Or a monogram, perhaps. Fee shook her head. No names. But she dropped something once. A card with some initials on it. Looked like PJI. I gave it back to her, but she seemed spooked, like it burned her. Poirot exchanged a glance with Catchpool. The monogram again. Merci, Madame Spring. You have been most helpful. As they left, Catchpool muttered, "This is getting stranger by the minute." A monogram, a glove, a woman predicting her own death. What's next? Next, mon ami Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. We find Jenny Hobbs, and we discover why her death is a justice she accepts. The little grey cells, they are awake now. They will not rest until the truth is revealed. By midday, Catchpool's inquiries at the yard yielded a lead. A lodging house near Drury Lane, where a woman matching Jenny's description had rented a room. Poirot and Catchpool arrived to find the landlady, a sour-faced woman named Mrs. Tuttle, scrubbing her doorstep. Jenny Hobbs, she sniffed. Paid up for the month, but I ain't seen her since yesterday. Left in a hurry, she did. Said something about settling an old score. Poirot's moustache twitched. An old score, you say? Did she have visitors? A man, perhaps, with a flat cap. Mrs. Tuttle's eyes narrowed. Might have been saw a fellow loitering across the street last night. Big chap, didn't get a good look. Thought he was just a vagrant. Thanking her, Poirot led Catchpool back to the street. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture remained blurred. Jenny's fear, the monogram, the shadowed manor, pointed to a past sin, a debt now called due. But why beg Poirot not to pursue her killer? What justice could her death serve? As evening fell, Poirot stood at his window, the tram ticket and glove on the table before him. The monogram PJ. I stared back, a silent challenge. He closed his eyes, letting his mind sift through the fragments. Jenny Hobbs was no ordinary fugitive. Her plea was a paradoxa victim who embraced her fate, a puzzle wrapped in guilt. Mon ami, he said to Catchpool, who was pacing the room, this is no simple crime. It is a drama, a tragedy, with acts yet to unfold. We must find Mademoiselle Hobbs before the curtain falls. Catchpool nodded, his earlier skepticism fading. I'll have the yard double their effort. If she's in London, we'll track her down. been, Poirot said, his voice soft but resolute. And I, Hercule Poirot, will ensure that justice, the true justice, not the shadow, mademoiselle. Hobbes' is served. The chapter closed with Poirot's resolve firm, the mystery of Jenny Hobbes and her cryptic monogram taking root. The stage was set, the players introduced, and the first act complete, a tantalizing promise of revelations to come. Chapter 2. The Bloxham Hotel Murders. The rain-slicked streets of London gleamed under the gaslights as Hercule Poirot made his way back to his boarding-house, the damp chill of the March evening seeping through his overcoat. His mind, however, was far from the weather. The encounter with Jenny Hobbes at Pleasant's coffee-house lingered like a half-sold cipher. Her trembling voice and cryptic plea, "Do not pursue my killer, for my death will serve justice," replaying in his thoughts. His meticulously polished shoes tapped a steady rhythm on the cobblestones, each step a counterpoint to the questions swirling in his little grey cells. Who was Jenny running from, and why did she speak of her death as if it were both inevitable and deserved? The boarding-house on Lupton Street was a modest affair, its red-brick facade blending into the uniformity of the Bloomsbury Road. Ascended the steps, his gloved hand brushing the brass knocker before he entered. The parlour was warm, the air heavy with the scent of coal and Mrs. Whitlow's overcooked mutton. He hung his hat and coat, intending to retire to his room for a tisane and quiet reflection, when a voice interrupted his plans. "Monsieur Poirot, you're back late. Trouble keeping you up, or just the coffee-house's dreadful tea?" Edward Catchpool, Poirot's fellow lodger and a young Scotland Yard detective, lounged in an armchair by the fire. His lanky frame sprawled with the casual arrogance of youth. His tie was loosened, and a glass of whiskey sat on the table beside, dim, catching the firelight. Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint sign of amusement. "The tea, it is passable, mon ami, but the company tonight was most intriguing, and you have the look of a man burdened by more than Mrs. Cooking." Catchpool's grin faded, replaced by a grimace. He sat up, running a hand through his dishevelled hair. "You've a knack for reading people, Poirot. I've just come from a beastly mess at the Bloxham Hotel. 3 murders, all in one night. It's the sort of case that makes you question whether London's gone mad." Poirot's eyes sharpened, the casual air vanishing. 3 murders at the Bloxham. Mon Dieu, this is no small matter. Tell me everything, Catchpool. Leave out not a single detail. Catchpool sighed, clearly reluctant, but aware that Poirot's curiosity was a force not easily denied. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "You'd better sit. It's a grim tale, and I'm not sure I've got my head around it yet." Poirot settled into the chair, his posture impeccable despite the late hour. He steepled his fingers, his gaze fixed on Catchpool. "Begin, if you please." "The Bloxham Hotel," Catchpool explained, "was one of London's grandest establishments. A marble and gilt monument to opulence nestled in the heart of Mayfair. Its reputation for discretion and luxury drew the elite aristocrats, foreign dignitaries, and the occasional eccentric millionaire. But that evening its polished veneer had been shattered by the discovery of 3 bodies, each found in a separate room on the 3rd floor. The victims, Catchpool said. Consulting a small notebook he pulled from his pocket, were Harriet Sipple, Ida Gransbury, and Richard Negus. All 3 were guests, though they didn't seem to know each other, at least not according to the hotel register. Harriet was a widow, late 40s, from some village called Great Horling. Ida, about the same age, was a spinster, also from Great Harling. Negus was a barrister, mid-50s, London-based but with ties to the same village. No obvious connection beyond that. Poirot's brow furrowed. Great Horling, you say? This is curious. Continue. Catchpool leaned forward, his voice dropping. Here's where it gets strange. Each victim was found posed sitting upright at a desk, hands folded, as if they were waiting for something. And in each of their mouths, he paused, shaking his head, a cufflink, gold, monogrammed with the initials PJI, identical in every case. Poirot's fingers tightened slightly, the only outward sign of his quickening interest. PJI monogrammed cufflinks. This is not the work of a common criminal, Catchpool. This is a message, a signature. The killer wishes us to see something. What else? They were poisoned, Catchpool said. Arsenic, the coroner thinks, though we're waiting on the full report. No signs of a struggle, no forced entry. The rooms were locked from the inside, and the keys were still in the doors. It's as if they just sat down and let it happen. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Locked rooms, poisoned victims, and cufflinks with initials that may or may not belong to the killer. This is a puzzle most deliberate, Catchpool. And you say, this happened tonight, discovered a few hours ago. The hotel staff found them during a routine check. The whole place is in chaos, guests demanding to leave, reporters sniffing about, my superintendent's breathing down my neck to wrap it up quickly. But I've got nothing solid yet. Poirot leaned back, his mind racing. The image of Jenny Hobbs flashed before him, her pale face, her trembling hands, her plea not to pursue. Killer. Could there be a connection? 3 murders, so meticulously staged, and a woman who spoke of her own death as if it were part of some grand design. This village, Great Horling, he said slowly. It is mentioned for all 3 victims. This cannot be a coincidence. And the initials PJ, I do. They belong to a person, a place, or something else entirely. Catchpool shrugged. We're checking records, but so far, nothing. The cufflinks are custom-made, no jeweler's mark. I've got men canvassing the hotel staff, but they're tight-lipped or just plain terrified. Poirot rose, his movements precise. Then we must go to the Bloxham at once. The scene of the crime, it speaks, Catchpool. It will tell us what the killer wishes us to know and perhaps what he does not. Catchpool blinked. Poirot. You're not with the Yard. My superintendent will have my head if I drag a civilian into this. Poirot's moustache curved into a faint smile. A civilian? Nan, mon ami. I am Hercule Poirot, and I am never merely a civilian when there is a mystery to be solved. You will find my assistance invaluable. Come, we waste time. The Bloxham Hotel loomed like a palace against the night sky, its white marble facade glowing under the electric lights. Carriages and motorcars lined the street, their drivers huddled against the rain as reporters lingered, hoping for a scrap of scandal. Poirot and Catchpool slipped through a side entrance, avoiding the chaos of the main lobby. A harried porter, his face pale, led them to the third floor, where constables stood guard outside 3 rooms, 317, 319, and 321. The first room, Harriet Sipple's, was a study in understated luxury silk wallpaper, a 4-poster bed, a crystal chandelier casting soft light. Harriet herself sat at a mahogany desk, her body rigid, her hands folded as if in prayer. Her face, frozen in death, bore a faint expression of resignation. The gold cufflink glinted in her open mouth, a grotesque ornament. Poirot circled the room, his eyes darting from the body to the surrounding. "Observe, Catchpool," he said, pointing to the desk. "No papers, no personal effects. The killer, he has taken care to leave only what he wishes us to see." Catchpool nodded, scribbling in his notebook. Same in the other rooms. Negus had a briefcase, but it was empty. Ida's handbag had nothing but a handkerchief and a few coins. Poirot knelt, examining the carpet. A faint smudge caught his ardour, trace of mud, barely visible. This mud, it is not from the streets of London. It is too red, too coarse. Perhaps from the countryside. Great Harling Pater. Catchpool frowned. "You think the killer tracked it in, or the victim?" Poirot said. "We must know more of this Harriet Sipple, her life, her enemies." They moved to Ida Gransberry's room, then Richard Negus's, finding the same eerie tableau in each. A body posed at a desk, a cufflink in the mouth, no signs of violence. But in Negus's room, Poirot paused. A faint scratch mark marred the desk's surface, barely noticeable. He traced it with a gloved finger. "This mark, it is fresh." Something was dragged across the desk. A key, perhaps. Catchpool peered. Over his shoulder, a key. The room keys were in the locks. "Precisement," Poirot said. "But what if there was another key, one not meant to be found?" Their inspection was interrupted by the arrival of Luca Losery, the Bloxham's owner. He swept into the room like a stage actor, his tailored suit pristine despite the hour, his dark hair slicked back. "Monsieur Poirot, an honor truly, though I wish it were under happier circumstances," he said, his Italian accent thick with theatrical flourish. "This is a calamity. My hotel ruined. Who would commit such an outrage in my establishment?" Poirot's eyes narrowed, studying Losery's exaggerated gestures. "Monsieur Losery, you know your guests well. Did you notice anything unusual about these Madame Sipple, Mademoiselle Gransbury, Monsieur Negus?" Losery's hands fluttered. "They were ordinary, I suppose." Madame Sipple was sharp-tongued, always complaining about the service. Mademoiselle Gransbury kept to herself, very pious. Monsieur Negus was polite but distant, always scribbling in a notebook. "Pray," he carried. "I thought nothing of it until this." He shuddered dramatically. Poirot's mustache twitched. A notebook, you say? And where is this notebook now? Lazari blinked. I don't know. Perhaps the police took it. Catchpool shook his head. No notebook in evidence. I'll have the men check again. Poirot's gaze lingered. By Lazari, you have a keen eye, monsieur. Did you see anyone unusual near these rooms tonight? A guest, a stranger, perhaps a member of your staff? Lazari hesitated, his flamboyance faltering. There was a maid, Sally Pears. She was play on this floor earlier, but she's new, nervous. I don't think she'd be involved. Poirot nodded, filing the name away. Merci, Monsieur Lazari. We will speak again. As Lazari departed, Poirot turned to Catchpool. This Sally Pears. We must find her, and we must learn more of great Pauline. The answer lies there, I am certain. But first, he knelt again, his eyes scanning the floor. Near the door, half hidden by the carpet's fringe, was a small brass key, its surface scratched. Voila, he murmured, holding it up. The key that does not belong. Catchpool stared. How did we miss that? Because, mon ami, the killer wished it to be missed, but Hercule Poirot misses nothing. The rest of the night was a whirlwind of interviews and inspections. Sally Pears, the maid, was a timid girl of 19, her hands trembling as she recounted her evening. She'd seen nothing unusual, she insisted, though her eyes darted nervously when asked about the third floor. Poirot noted her fear, but let her go, sensing she was a pawn, not a player. By dawn, the hotel was sealed, the press baying at the gates. Poirot and Catchpool returned to Lupton Street, the key safely tucked in Poirot's pocket. Over a breakfast of toast and tea, lamenting the absence of a proper croissant, Catchpool voiced his doubts. This feels personal, Poirot. The cufflinks, the posing, the locked rooms, it's like the killers playing a game. Oui, Poirot said, sipping his tea. A game with rules we do not yet understand. But the cufflinks, they are the key, not this brass one, but the monogrammed ones, PJI. They are a signature, a taunt, and Jenny Hobbs, she is part of this, I am certain. We must find her, Catchpool, before the killer does. Catchpool rubbed his eyes, exhausted and great hauling. You keep circling back to it, because it is the heart of the matter, Poirot said. The victims, they are connected by more than a village. There is a story there, a wound unhealed. You must go to Great Holling, mon ami, learn its secrets. I will remain here to unravel the mystery of the Bloxham. Catchpool groaned but nodded. Fine, but if I'm trudging through the countryside, you'd better have a breakthrough by the time I'm back. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Have no fear, Catchpool. The little grey cells, they are already at work. As Catchpool left to prepare, Poirot leaned back, the brass key glinting in his hand. The Bloxham Hotel murders were no random act of violence. They were a performance, a carefully staged drama with a cast of players yet to be revealed. And at its center, he sensed, was Jenny Hobbs, a woman running from a past that had already claimed 3 lives. Chapter 3. The eccentric hotelier. The Bloxham Hotel stood like a grand dame on a quiet London street, its marble facade gleaming under the soft glow of gas lamps. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, adjusted his hat as he stepped from the taxi's sharp eyes scanning the ornate entrance. Beside him, Edward Catchpool, Scotland Yard's earnest young detective, fidgeted with his notebook, already overwhelmed by the weight of the triple murder they were about to investigate. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain and the promise of secrets waiting to be uncovered. "Mon ami, you must calm your nerves," Poirot said, his voice a melodic blend of authority and reassurance. "The scene of a crime is like a canvas sciatic at first, but with careful observation the masterpiece reveals itself." Catchpool nodded, though his jaw tightened. 3 bodies, Poirot. 3 cufflinks with the same initials. This isn't a canvas, it's a nightmare. Poirot's moustache twitched with a hint of a smile. A nightmare, perhaps, but one with a pattern. And patterns, Catchpool, are the breadcrumbs of truth. They ascended the hotel's steps, the heavy glass doors swinging open to reveal a lobby that was a study in opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across gilded moldings, and a crimson carpet stretched like a royal pathway. Behind the reception desk stood Luca Losery, the hotel's owner, a man whose presence was as theatrical as the decor. His silk waistcoat shimmered under the lights, and his arms flung wide in greeting, as if Poirot and Catchpool were honored guests rather than investigators of murder. "Monsieur Poirot, the great detective, graces my humble establishment," Losery's voice boomed, his Italian accent thick and deliberate, as though he savored each syllable. "And you, Mr. Catchpool, the stalwart of Scotland Yard, welcome, welcome to the Bloxham." Poirot inclined his head, unfazed by the flamboyance. "Monsieur Losery, your hotel is anything but humble, but we are not here for pleasantries. 3 of your guests have met a most unfortunate end, and I require your cooperation." Losery's face fell into an exaggerated mask of sorrow, his hands clasping over his heart. A tragedy, a stain upon the Bloxham's honor. Harriet, Sybil, Ida Gransbury, Richard Negus, such fine souls, cut down in their prime. I am at your service, gentlemen. Ask, and I shall answer. Catchpool scribbled notes, muttering, "Fine souls, indeed. We'll see about that." Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied Losery. The hotelier's theatrics were a performance, but beneath the flourish, Poirot sensed a mind as precise as his own. "Monsieur Losery, tell me of the night of the murders, every detail, no matter how small." Losery gestured toward a plush velvet sofa, inviting them to sit. It was a quiet evening, as most are here. The Bloxham is a haven for the discerning. You see diplomats, artists, the occasional eccentric. The guests dined, retired to their rooms, and all seemed well. Then, this morning, the maids screamed the house down. 3 bodies, 3 rooms, 3 cufflinks. Monstrous. Poirot's fingers steepled. "And these cufflinks, PJI. You have seen such items before." Losery's eyes widened, then narrowed, as if weighing how much to reveal. Never, monsieur. They are exquisite, gold with sapphire inlays, but not of my hotel's making. I would know if they were. Catchpool leaned forward. You're sure no guest ever mentioned them? No one tried to pawn something similar? Lozary's laugh was a cascade of notes. Pawn at the block. My guests do not pawn, Mr. Catchpool. They purchase, they indulge, they live. He paused, then added softly, but I did overhear a curious thing. One of the maids, Clara, mentioned seeing a gentleman in the lounge 2 nights ago, fidgeting with a cufflink that gleamed oddly. She thought nothing of it until today. Poirot's gaze sharpened. This gentleman, describe him. Lozary shrugged, a gesture as elegant as a dancer's. Clara said he was tall, gaunt, with a face like a mournful poet. Dark coat, silver hair. He sat alone, nursing a brandy, and left before midnight. She didn't catch his name. Catchpool scribbled furiously. We'll need to speak to Clara, of course. Lazary clapped, summoning a porter with a snap of his fingers. Fetch Clara at once. As they waited, Poirot's mind churned. The cufflinks were no accident. They were a signature, a taunt. But whose and why? Place them in the mouths of the victims, like coins for Coran. The ritualistic nature of the killings suggested a mind both vengeful and meticulous, someone who reveled in the act's symbolism. Clara, a slight girl with nervous eyes, appeared, twisting her apron. Sirs, I don't know much, I swear. I only saw the man for a moment. Poirot's voice was gentle, coaxing. Mademoiselle Clara, even a moment can hold a universe of truth. Tell me of this man with the cufflink. She swallowed. He was sad, sir, like he carried a weight. His hands shook when he touched the cufflink, like it burned him. I thought he might drop it, but he tucked it away quick when he saw me looking. And the cufflink, Poirot pressed. It was like those found with the victims. I couldn't swear to it, sir. It was gold with a bit of blue. That's all I saw. Poirot nodded, dismissing her with a kind smile. As Clara scurried off, he turned to Catchpool. Poet with a trembling hand. This is no ordinary killer, mon ami. This is a man who feels his crime as deeply as he plans it. Catchpool frowned. Or it's a coincidence. We don't even know if this man's connected. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Coincidence is the lazy man's explanation. No, this man is a thread in our tapestry. We must find him. Lozary led them to the victims' rooms on the 3rd floor, each door sealed with police tape. The first, Harriet Sipple's, was a vision of elegant silk drapes, a 4-poster bed, and a faint scent of lavender. But the scene was marred by the body's absence, marked only by a chalk outline and a faint stain on the carpet. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the outline's edge. The body was arranged, Catchpool, he said, arms at her sides, legs straight, as if laid out for a funeral. This was no hasty act. The killer took time to honor his work. Catchpool shuddered. Honor, that's a strange word for murder. Poirot stood, brushing his trousers. To the killer, it is everything. The cufflink in her mouth, is not mockery. It is a message. In Ida Gransbury's room, the scene was eerily similar. The bed was undisturbed, the body's outline precise, the cufflink's placement deliberate. But Poirot's attention snagged on a small detail, a single rose petal, wilted and crimson, tucked beneath the bedside table. He plucked it with tweezers, holding it to the light. A rose petal, Catchpool, curious, Nan. The maids here are too meticulous to leave such a thing. Catchpool squinted. A lover's token, or another clue. Poirot slipped the petal into an envelope, perhaps both. The killer plays a game of symbols, and we must learn the rules. Richard Negus' room was the last, its austerity a stark contrast to the others. No flowers, no frills, just a single chair, a half-empty brandy decanter, and a chessboard with a game left unfinished. Poirot paused, his fingers hovering over a black knight. A man who plays chess alone is a man at war with himself, he mused. Catchpool checked his notes. Negus was a barrister, wasn't he? Precise, methodical. Maybe he was the target, and the others were collateral. Poirot shook his head. None. All three were chosen. The cufflinks bind them. But this chessboard, he moved a pawn, then stopped, his eyes narrowing. The game is incomplete, yet deliberate. The killer touched this board. How can you possibly know that? Catchpool asked, exasperated. Poirot pointed to a faint smudge on the white queen, a fingerprint, faint but present. Not Negus, I wager, for he would not smudge his own pieces. The killer could not resist leaving a mark. As they descended to the lobby, a commotion erupted. A porter, red-faced and panting, rushed toward Lozeri, clutching a small object. "Sir, I found this in the service stairwell, near the 3rd floor." Lozeri took it, his flamboyance fading to unease. It was a brass key, its surface scratched. The number 317 engraved on its head at Agatha Gransbury's room. Poirot's moustache quivered. "By key," dropped in haste. "This is no accident. Monsieur Lazari, who has access to these stairs." Lazari hesitated, then admitted, "Only staff. The guests use the main lifts or the grand staircase, but anyone could have slipped in. The stairwell's rarely locked." Catchpool's eyes lit up. An insider, then. Someone who knows the hotel's workings. Poirot's gaze drifted to the bustling lobby, where porters, maids, and guests moved like pieces on a chessboard. Or someone who wishes us to think. So, the key is a breadcrumb, Catchpool, but it leads to a trap or a truth. We must tread carefully. Lozeri, eager to reclaim his charm, clapped his hands. "Gentlemen, you must dine with me tonight. A meal to sharpen your minds. The Bloxham's chef is a genius. His coq au vin is a revelation." Poirot declined with a polite wave. "Another time, perhaps. For now, the little grey cells require no sustenance but truth." As they stepped into the evening, Catchpool muttered, "He's hiding something, isn't he? Lozeri is too theatrical." Poirot chuckled softly. "Theatrical, yes, but not deceitful. His flair is his armor. He sees more than he says, but he is no killer. The true culprit is subtler, their performance flawless." They walked into the London dusk, the city's pulse quickening around them. Poirot's mind was a whirl of details: the mournful poet, the rose petal, the smudged chess piece, the dropped key. Each was a note in a symphony of motive and malice, and he would conduct it to its crescendo. "Catchpool," he said, pausing under a flickering street lamp. "We must find this poet with the trembling hand, and we must ask why a killer leaves a key to be found. The answer lies not in what is shown, but in what is hidden." Catchpool nodded, his earlier skepticism giving way to trust. "Where do we start?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with purpose. "With Fee Springs Coffee House. The woman, Jenny Hobshay, spoke of justice and death. We must know her story, for it is tied to this one." As they hailed a taxi, the weight of the case settled on Poirot. 3 murders, 3 cufflinks, 1 key. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until every move was revealed. Chapter 4. Jenny's Shadow. The London fog clung to the cobblestones like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant cries of newsboys hawking late editions. Hercule Poirot, his silver-topped cane tapping a precise rhythm, navigated the labyrinthine streets toward Pleasant's coffee house. The establishment, with its warm amber glow spilling onto the pavement, was a beacon in the damp chill of 1929. Inside, the air was thick with the aroma of roasted beans and the low hum of conversation. But Poirot's mind was elsewhere, tethered to the cryptic words of Jenny Hobbs. "Do not try to catch my murderer, for my death will be justice." He settled at his usual corner table, the one with a clear view of the door, and adjusted his impeccable moustache with a gloved finger. Jenny's warning, delivered in a trembling whisper to nights prior, had ignited his little grey cells. Her pale face, framed by a frayed hat, had betrayed a terror that was not mere hysteria, but something deeper, rooted in a past she dared not name. And now, with the gruesome discovery of 3 bodies at the Bloxham Hotel, each with a cufflink marked PJI in their mouths, Poirot sensed a thread connecting Jenny's fear to the murders. The question was not if they were linked, but how. The door chimed, tinkled, and Edward Catchpool, Poirot's young Scotland Yard companion, entered, his trench coat damp and his expression harried. "Monsieur Catchpool," Poirot greeted, gesturing to the chair opposite. "You are late, but I trust you bring news." Catchpool slid into the seat, his broad shoulders slumping. "I've been at the Yard all morning, Poirot. The Bloxham case is a nightmare. 3 victims, no witnesses, and those blasted cufflinks PJI. We've got nothing solid yet, but the press is circling like vultures." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The cufflinks. They are not mere decoration, mon ami. They are a signature, a message. But we must return to Mademoiselle Jenny. Her words, they haunt me. She spoke of justice, of a death foretold. We must find her before this justice claims her." Catchpool frowned, stirring his coffee. "You're certain she's tied to the murders? She could just be a frightened girl, caught in some personal drama." Nan, Poirot said, his voice sharp as a blade. "The coincidence, it is too precise. Jenny flees from Pleasance. The same night, 3 bodies are found, each marked with a clue that screams intention. We must seek her out, and I believe the key lies here, with Madame Fee Spring. He nodded toward the counter, where Fee Spring, the coffeehouse's spirited proprietress, was wiping down mugs with a practiced hand. Her auburn curls were pinned loosely, and her sharp green eyes missed nothing, darting across the room like a hawk's. Poirot had noted her watching Jenny. That night, her gaze lingering with a mix of pity and suspicion. "Madame Spring," Poirot called, rising with a flourish. "A moment, if you please." Fee approached, her apron stained with coffee grounds. "Mr. Poirot, always a pleasure. What's this about? Not complaining about the scones, I hope?" "Never, madame," Poirot said, his smile disarming. "Your scones are perfections. No, I wish to speak of a young woman who was here 2 nights ago. Jenny Hobbs, blonde, nervous, wearing a worn hat with a green ribbon. You observed her, I think." Fee's expression tightened, her hands pausing on the rag. "Jenny, I saw her. Looked like she'd seen a ghost. Poor thing. Came in, ordered tea, didn't touch it. Kept glancing at the door like she expected the devil himself to walk through." "Did she speak to anyone?" Poirot pressed, "or mention where she was going?" Fee hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "Not to me, she didn't. But I heard her muttering something about Great Holling before she bolted. Sounded like a place, maybe a village. She was in a right state, Mr. Poirot. I figured she was running from a mangeless lover, maybe." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Great Holling, you say? This is most interesting. And her demeanor? She seemed guilty, perhaps, as if she carried a secret." Fee leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Guilty? Maybe. She had that look, like someone who's done something they can't undo. But I'll tell you this, she wasn't just scared for herself. She was scared of someone, or something." Poirot nodded, filing away every nuance. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. If you recall anything more, you will inform me. Fee gave a curt nod and returned to her counter, but her glance lingered on Poirot, as if she sensed the weight of the mystery. He carried Catchpool, leaned forward, his voice low. "Great Holling. Never heard of it. You think Jenny's from there, perhaps?" Poirot mused, tapping his cane against the floor. "Or perhaps it is a place tied to her fear, to the cufflinks, to the murders. We must learn more. You, mon ami, will go to Scotland Yard and search for any record of Jenny Hobbs, her address, her history. I will make inquiries about this Great Holling." Catchpool groaned. "You're sending me on a paper chase while you play detective in some quaint village." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Precisely. Your diligence at the Yard will uncover facts, while my little grey cells will uncover truths. We meet again tomorrow. The next morning, Poirot boarded a train at Paddington Station, bound for the countryside. Great Holling, he had learned from a quick call to a contact at the British Library, was a small village in Devon, unremarkable save for a scandal in 1913 that had made the regional papers. The details were vague. A vicar and his wife, dead under mysterious circumstances. But Poirot's intuition hummed. Jenny's mention of the village was no accident. The train rattled through mist-shrouded fields, and Poirot, seated in a first-class carriage, reviewed his note. Jenny's warning suggested she expected death, yet she pleaded for her killer to go unpunished. Why? Was she complicit in some crime, seeking atonement? And the cufflinks, PJI initials. Yes, but of whom? A person. Place, a symbol. The monograms were too deliberate to be ornamental, yet their meaning eluded him. Great Holling emerged from the fog like a painting, its thatched cottages and stone church nestled in a valley. Poirot disembarked his polished shoes, sinking slightly into the muddy platform. A local boy, no older than 12, offered to carry his bag, but Poirot waved him off with a smile. "I carry my own burdens, Petty. But tell me, where might I find someone who knows the history of this village?" The boy pointed toward the church. "Vicar's widow, Margaret Ernst. She's old as the hills, but her memory's sharp. Lives in the cottage by the graveyard." Poirot tipped his hat and made his way to the church, its spire piercing the grey sky. The graveyard was a quiet expanse of weathered stones, and beside it stood a modest cottage, its garden overgrown with roses. He knocked, and the door creaked open to reveal Margaret Ernst, a woman in her late 60s, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes, sharp and wary, assessed Poirot with a single glance. "Monsieur Hercule Poirot," he introduced himself, bowing slightly. "I am a detective, seeking information about a woman named Jenny Hobbs and a tragedy that occurred here in 1913. Margaret's face hardened, but she stepped aside. "Come in, then. I don't know any Jenny Hobbs, but 1913. That's a year this village hasn't forgotten." Inside, the cottage was sparse but tidy, with a fire crackling in the hearth. Margaret poured tea, her hands steady despite her age. "What do you know of 1913? She asked, her voice low. "Only whispers," Poirot said, sipping the tea. "A vicar, Patrick Ives, and his wife, Frances. A scandal, perhaps a death. I believe it connects to a woman in danger and murders in London." Margaret's cup trembled slightly. Patrick and Frances Ives. Good souls, both of them. He was. Our vicar, kind but strict. She was his shadow, always supporting him. But then came Harriet, simple vicious woman, with a tongue like a viper. She spread lies about Patrick, said he was improper with young women. The village turned on him. Frances couldn't bear the shame. They found her in the river, drowned. Patrick followed a week later, same way. Some say suicide, others say murder. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And Harriet Sipelchet is one of the victims in London. Nan." Margaret's gaze snapped to his. "Dead Harriet. Well, I won't shed tears. She destroyed lives here. But who else?" "Ida Gransbury and Richard Negus," Poirot said. "Do these names mean anything to you?" Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Ida was Harriet's shadow, always nodding along to her poison. Pritchett, he was quieter, but he backed Harriet's lies. They drove the Ivies to their graves. If they're dead, someone's settling scores. And Jenny Hobbs, Poirot pressed. A young woman, blonde, perhaps known here 16 years ago. Margaret shook her head. No Jenny Hobbs that I recall. But there was a girl, a maid in the vicarage. Quiet thing, in love with Patrick, or so the gossip went. She left after the tragedy. Could be your Jenny, but I never knew her name. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but insistent. This may describe her, if you please. Blonde, slight, always nervous. She was devoted to Patrick, but jealous took when Harriet's rumors started. Some said the maid helped spread them out of spite. After Frances died, she vanished. Poirot's mind raced. Jenny, jealous, complicit in a tragedy that led to 2 deaths. Was her warning a confession? Or was she a pawn in a larger game? Madame, one final question. The initials P.J. I do, they mean anything to you? Margaret frowned. P.J.I. Patrick James Ives. That was his full name. But why Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. Mercy, Madame Ernst. You have given me much to consider. Back in London, Poirot rendezvoused with Catchpool at a quiet pub near Scotland Yard. The young detective's face was grim as he slid a thin file across by the table. Jenny Hobbs, he said. Not much to go on. Last known address was a boarding house in Holborn, but she left a month ago. No family. No record of employment since 1913. It's like she's a ghost. Poirot's fingers drummed the table. A ghost with a past, mon ami. In Great Harling, I learned of a tragedy vicar and his wife, destroyed by lies spread by Harriet Sipple, Ida Gransbury, and Richard Nagus. Jenny, I believe, was a maid there, perhaps complicit in those lies. The cufflinks, PJI, they are for Patrick James Ives, a symbol of vengeance. Catchpool's eyes widened. You're saying someone's killing the people who ruined Ives. And Jenny's next. Precisement, Poirot said. But Jenny's warning suggests she knows her fate and accepts it. Why? Is it guilt? Or is she protecting someone? We must find her, Catchpool, before the killer does. The pub's clock struck 9, and outside the fog thickened as if shielding the city's secrets. Poirot's mind churned, piecing together to fragments. A village scandal, a jealous maid, 3 bodies, and a 4th cufflink yet to claim its victim. Jenny Hobbs was out there, a shadow in the mist, and Poirot would not rest until he brought her into the light. The search for Jenny led Poirot to a dingy alley in Whitechapel, where a street vendor claimed to have seen a blonde woman matching her description, clutching a tattered hat. The vendor, a wiry man with a crooked nose, pointed toward a crumbling tenement. She went in there. Gouve looked like she was running from Summit. Poirot approached the tenement, its windows dark, tell and curtains drawn. The door was unlocked, creaking as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and despair. He climbed the narrow stairs, his cane echoing in the silence, until he reached a door marked 3B. A faint sob came from within. "Mademoiselle Hobbs," Poirot called softly. "It is Hercule Poirot. I wish only to help you." The sobbing stopped, replaced by a tense silence. Then a voice, thin and trembling. "Go away, please. You can't stop it. It's too late." Poirot's hand rested on the doorknob. "Mademoiselle, you spoke of justice, but justice is not death. Tell me your story, and let us find the truth together." The door opened a crack, revealing Jenny's pale face, her eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I helped kill them, Patrick and Francis. I was young, jealous, stupid. I let Harriet twist me, spread her lies. Now it's my turn to pay." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "And the cufflinks, PJI." Jenny's breath hitched. "Patrick's initials. Someone knows what we did. They're making us pay, one by one. I saw the list, Monsieur Poirot. My name's on it." "Whose list?" Poirot pressed, his heart racing. But Jenny shook her head, tears spilling. "I can't say. If I tell you, he'll know. He always knows." She slammed the door, and the lock clicked. Poirot stood in the dim hallway, his mind ablaze. Jenny was no mere victim. She was a piece of the puzzle, caught between guilt and fear. The killer, whoever he was close, watching, waiting. And the fourth cufflink loomed like a guillotine's blade. That night, Poirot returned to his flat, the city's pulse throbbing outside his window. He lit a single candle and sat at his desk, sketching a timeline. 1913, Great Holling, the Ive. Tragedy. Harriet, Ida, Richard, Jenny, all complicit. The cufflinks, a symbol of retribution. But who was the avenger? A relative of Patrick Ives, a friend, or someone else, hidden in the shadows of the village's past? He penned a note to Catchpool, urgent. Investigate any surviving kin of Patrick or Francis Ives. The killer is personal, precise. We are close. As the candle flickered, Poirot's eyes gleamed with resolve. Jenny Hobbs was the key, her shadow stretching from Great Holling to the Bloxham Hotel. He would find her again, and with her the truth. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot never lost. Chapter 5. Great Holling's secret saidward. Catchpool's train rattled through the English countryside. The rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails, a stark contrast to the unease knotting his stomach. The year was 1929, and the fog-draped fields beyond the window seemed to mirror the murkiness of the case he'd been thrust into. Hercule Poirot, with his maddeningly precise demeanor, had dispatched him to Great Holling, a village buried in the folds of Devon, to unearth the truth behind Jenny Hobbs' cryptic warning and the grim tableau of the Bloxham Hotel murders. 3 bodies: Harriet Sipple, Ida Gransbury, and Richard Negasich, with a monogrammed cufflink marked PJI in their mouths, lay at the heart of this puzzle. Jenny's plea, her terror-stricken eyes, and her insistence that her death would serve justice haunted Catchpool. Now, as the train slowed, the platform of Great Holling's modest station came into view, and with it the promise of answers or deeper shadows. The air was damp and heavy with the scent of wet earth as Catchpool stepped onto the platform. The station was little more than a wooden shelter, its paint peeling like old skin. A single porter, an elderly man with a face creased like crumpled parchment, eyed him warily. "Great hauling ain't much for visitors," the porter muttered, hefting Catchpool's small case. "What's your business?" "Scotland Yard," Catchpool said, keeping his tone brisk. "Official inquiry." "Point me to the village centre, if you please." The porter's eyes narrowed, but he gestured toward a muddy lane winding into the distance. "Half a mile that way. Mind the ruts. And the folks, they don't take kindly to strangers pokin' about." Catchpool nodded, adjusting his hat against the drizzle. The walk was brisk, the lane flanked by hedgerows tangled with brambles. Great Harling emerged gradually, a cluster of stone cottages, their chimneys puffing thin streams of smoke. A squat church with a lopsided steeple and a pub, called the King's Head, its sin swaying in the wind. The village felt frozen in time, as if the world beyond its borders had moved on while it clung to some unspoken pact. His first stop was the vicarage, where Poirot had instructed him to seek out anyone connected to Patrick Ives, the vicar whose name had surfaced in whispers tied to Jenny Hobbs. The vicarage stood apart, a modest house with ivy cloying up its walls. Catchpool knocked, and the door creaked open to reveal Margaret Ernst, a woman in her late 50s, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, sized him up like a hawk assessing prey. "Edward Catchpool, Scotland Yard," he said, offering his credentials. "I am here about an old matter concerning Patrick Ives and his wife, Frances." Margaret's face tightened, her lips thinning to a line. "That's a name not spoken lightly here. What's your interest in the dead?" "3 murders in London," Catchpool said, watching her closely. "Harriet Sipple, Ida Gransbury, and Richard Negus. I have reason to believe their deaths are tied to events in Great Harling, perhaps involving Patrick Ives." Her hand gripped the doorframe, knuckles whitening. "You'd best come in," she said, her voice low. "But don't expect a warm welcome for stirring old ghosts." The parlor was sparse, with a single photograph on the mantel, a young couple, the man in clerical garb, the woman with a serene smile. Patrick and Frances Ives, Catchpool presumed. Margaret offered no tea, no pleasantries, only a hardback chair and a stare that could cut glass. Patrick and Frances Ives died in 1913. She began, unprompted. "A tragedy that broke this village. Patrick was our vicar, a good man, kind to a fault. Frances was his light, gentle, devout. But Harriet Sipple," her voice dripped with venom, "that woman spread lies that poisoned everything." "What lies?" Catchpool pressed, his notebook open. Margaret's eyes flicked to the photograph. "Harriet claimed Patrick was performing unholy acts. Necromancy, they said. Speaking to the dead, defiling the church. It started as whispers, but Harriet, with her sharp tongue and righteous airs, made it a crusade. She rallied others, Gransbury among them. They accused Patrick of consorting with spirits, of betraying his vows. The village turned on him. Catchpool scribbled, his pulse quickening, and Frances stood by him, but the pressure crushed her. They found them both dead poison. They said, self-inflicted, though I never believed it. The village buried the truth along with them, but the guilt lingers. Guilt. Catchpool leaned forward. Whose guilt? Margaret's gaze hardened. Everyone's. Mine, for not speaking louder. The village, for believing Harriet's venom. And others, Richard Negus, for one. He was quieter, but he didn't stop her. They all let Patrick bend Frances fall. Catchpool's mind raced. The victims, Harriet, Ida, Richard, were all tied to this scandal, and Jenny Poirot had mentioned her connection to Great Holling. What of Jenny Hobbs? He asked. Did she play a role? Margaret's expression flickered, a shadow of unease. Jenny was young then, barely 20. She was infatuated with Patrick. Not improper, mind you, but intense. When Harriet's lies spread, Jenny was devastated. She left the village soon after their deaths. Haven't seen her since. Catchpool noted the hesitation in her voice. You're certain? Nothing more about Jenny? Margaret stood abruptly, smoothing her skirt. That's all I know. You'll want to speak to Dr. Flowerday. He was here then, saw it all. Belives at the end of the lane, blue door. The dismissal was clear, but Catchpool lingered. One last thing. Did Patrick or Frances leave any writings? Letters? Diaries? Margaret paused, then crossed to a small desk. From a drawer she produced a thin envelope, yellowed with age. This was found in the vicarage, after they died. I kept it, hoping it might clear their names one day. She handed it to him, her fingers trembling slightly. Don't make things worse than they are, Mr. Catchpool. Outside, the drizzle had thickened to a steady rain. Catchpool tucked the envelope inside his coat and made for Dr. House. The letter burned in his mind, a tangible link to the past. Poirot was so keen to unravel. The blue door was weathered, the paint chipped. A knock brought a wiry man in his 60s, with spectacles perched on a hawkish nose and a cautious smile. Dr. Flowerday. Edward Catchpool, Scotland Yard. I'm investigating a matter tied to Patrick and Frances Ives. The doctor's smile faded. Come in, but I warn you, that's a wound this village doesn't like reopened. The sitting room was cluttered with medical books and a faint smell of antiseptic. Flowerday gestured to a chair, his hands fidgety. What do you need to know? Everything about 1913, Catchpool said. Harriet Sippel's accusations, the Ives' deaths, and any connection to Jenny Hobbs or the London murders. Flowerday sighed, rubbing his temples. It was a dark time. Harriet Sippel was a force of nature, bitter, pious, and vicious. She claimed Patrick was holding seances, communing with spirits. Utter nonsense, but she had a knack for making people believe her. Ida Gransbury was her shadow, nodding along, spreading the poison. Richard Negus, he was different, reserved, but he didn't challenge her. I think he regretted it later. And the Ives? Catchpool asked. Patrick was a scholar, not bistic, He studied theology deeply, perhaps too deeply for some. Francis was his anchor. When the rumors started, they were hounded notes slipped under their door, sermons interrupted. I examined them after they died of cyanide. The coroner ruled suicide, but I always wondered what. Catchpool's pen hovered. Flowerday leaned closer, voice low. The poison was in their tea, but the teapot was empty, scrubbed clean. Who does that if they're about to die? And there was a witnesser boy, Tommy, who's long gone now. He swore he saw someone leaving the vicarage that night, someone who wasn't Patrick or Francis. Catchpool's heart thudded. Who? Tommy couldn't say. Too dark, too quick. But he was terrified, said it wasn't right. The envelope felt heavier in Catchpool's pocket. What about Jenny Hobbs? Floriday's eyes darted away. Jenny was troubled, loved Patrick in her way. When Harriet's lies took hold, Jenny was furious, but also broken. She left after the funerals. Some said she blamed herself for not stopping it. Catchpool opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper written in a neat, feminine hand. Francis Ives. It read, "To whoever finds this, know that we are innocent. The lies have consumed us, but the truth lies in the silence of those who know. Patrick's heart is pure, and I will not let him face this alone. If we fall, it is because the village has chosen darkness over light. Seek the one who hides in plain sight." The words sent a chill through Catchpool. "The one who hides in plain sight," he murmured. "What does it mean?" Flowerday shook his head. "I've puzzled over it for years. Frances was clever. She knew something or someone was behind it all, but she never named them." Catchpool stood, his mind a whirlwind. The letter confirmed a connection between the victims and Great Hireling, but it also hinted at a deeper conspiracy, someone orchestrating the tragedy. Harriet, Ida, and Richard had fueled the rumors, but who had pulled the strings? And where did Jenny fit? He thanked Flowerday and stepped into the rain, the village now cloaked in dusk. The King's Head beckoned, its warm lights a contrast to the gloom. Inside, the pub was half empty, the air thick with pipe smoke and the murmur of locals. Catchpool ordered a pint and settled at a corner table, the letter still burning in his thoughts. A grizzled man, his face weathered like the cliffs of Devon, slid into the seat opposite. "Heard your Eskin about the Ives," he said without preamble. "Name's Walter. I was groundskeeper at the church back then." Catchpool straightened. "What do you know?" Walter leaned in, his voice a gravelly whisper. "Harry, Sipple wasn't acting alone. Someone fed her those stories. Someone with a grudge. Pervise, I saw late at night, token in the churchyard. Harriet and a mantle hooded. Couldn't see his face, but his voice was sharp, educated. Not from here." Catchpool's pulse quickened. "Did you tell anyone?" "Tried. No one. Listened. After the Ives died, he vanished. But I'll tell you this, Jenny Hobbs was there too, once. Hiding in the shadows, listening. She knew something, and it scared her." The barmaid, a young woman with wary eyes, approached. "Walter, "Don't go scaring the gentleman with your tales," she said, but her voice held a tremor. "It's no tale," Walter snapped. "You know it, Elsie. You were a girl then, but you saw the way folks turned on the Ives, and you saw Jenny run." Elsie hesitated, then nodded. "Jenny came back, you know, just once, years ago. Asked me if I'd seen a man with a scar. His hand said he was dangerous. I hadn't, but she was shackened like a leaf." Catchpool's mind raced. A man with a scar, a hooded figure, a village complicit in silence. The pieces were forming, but the picture was still blurred. He thanked Walter and Elsie, leaving coins for his untouched pint. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the moon cast a pale glow over Great Halling. The church loomed ahead, its steeple, a silent sentinel. He slipped inside, the air cold and musty. The pews were empty, but a faint creak echoed from the vestry. Catchpool's hand went to his pocket, where his service revolver lay, a precaution Poirot had insisted on. "Who's there?" he called. A figure emerged, slight and cloaked in shadow. "Only me," came a soft voice. It was Elsie, the barmaid, her face pale. I followed you. There's something you need to see." She led him to a side chapel, where a loose floorboard revealed a small tin box. Inside was a second letter, this one in Patrick Ives' hand. "The truth is a burden I cannot carry alone. Harriet's lies were born of another's malice. A man who sought to destroy me for reasons I cannot fathom. If I die, it is to protect Francis. If you read this, seek the man with the scar. He is the serpent in our Eden." Catchpool's breath caught. The man with the scar, Jenny's fear, Walter's hooded figure. The letter confirmed a hidden orchestrator, someone who had manipulated Harriet and the others. But why? And how did it connect to the Bloxham murders? "Elsie," he said, "why show me this now?" Her eyes were wide, frightened. "Because someone's been asking about you, Mr. Catchpool." A man, tall, with a scar across his palm. "He was here yesterday, looking for anyone poking into the Ives business. I think he knows you're here." Catchpool's blood ran cold. The village, with its secrets and silences, was closing in. He tucked the letters into his coat, his resolve hardening. Poirot needed to know this Great Halling was no mere backdrop. It was the crucible where this tragedy had been forged. Jenny, Hobbs, the cufflinks, the murders, all roads led back to the man with the scar. As he stepped into the night, the church bell tolled a low, mournful sound. Catchpool glanced back, half expecting to see a shadowed figure watching. The lane was empty, but the weight of unseen eyes followed him. Great Halling held its secrets tightly, but Catchpool was determined to pry them loose, for Poirot, for Jenny, and for the truth buried in the village's haunted heart. Chapter 6. The artist's Alabitha fog hung low over London's cobbled streets, curling like a living thing around the gas lamps that flickered valiantly against the damp night. Hercule Poirot, his silver-topped cane clicking rhythmically against pavement, walked with purpose toward the modest studio of Nancy Decay. The artist, whose name had surfaced like a ghost from the Bloxham Hotel's grim tableau. Beside him, Edward Catchpool, his young Scotland Yard companion, struggled to match the Belgian detective's brisk pace, his breath puffing out in short, anxious bursts. "Poirot," Catchpool ventured, his voice low as if the fog itself might eavesdrop. "Are you certain this Nancy Duquesne is worth our time? She's an artist, not a murderer. Her name came up only because a porter saw her leaving the hotel. It could be coincidence." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of amusement or irritation. Catchpool could never quite tell. Coincidence, mon ami. None, none. In a case such as this, with 3 bodies, each adorned with a cufflink marked PJI, there is no room for coincidence. Every detail, every name, is a thread in the tapestry, and this Mademoiselle Duquesne is a thread that pulls taut. They turned onto a narrow lane in Bloomsbury, where the buildings leaned together as if sharing secret. Nancy Duquesne's studio was a squat, ivy-clad structure, its windows glowing faintly with candlelight. The air smelled of turpentine and wet stone, a peculiar blend that seemed to suit the enigmatic woman they were about to confront. Poirot paused at the door, his gloved hand hovering over the knocker. "Observe, Catchpool," he said, his green eyes glinting. "The artist's world is one of creation, but also of concealment. What she shows us and what she hides will tell us much." Catchpool nodded, though his stomach churned with unease. He was still reeling from Great Holling revelations, the village's dark history, the scandal surrounding Patrick and Francis Ives, and the letter hinting at their innocence. The Bloxham Murders, with their monogrammed cufflinks, felt like a puzzle with too many edges and no clear center. And now this artist, Nancy Duquesne, who had been seen fleeing the hotel on the night of the murders. What could she know? Poirot rapped the knocker sharply. The door creaked open almost at once, revealing a woman in her late 30s, her auburn hair loosely pinned, streaked with flecks of cerulean paint. Her eyes, a striking hazel, widened briefly at the sight of Poirot's immaculate attire and Catchpool's official-looking overcoat. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth but guarded, "I wasn't expecting visitors at this hour. To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Mademoiselle Duquesne," Poirot began, bowing slightly. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is my associate, Inspector Edward Catchpool of Scotland Yard. We are investigating the unfortunate events at the Bloxham Hotel. May we enter?" Nancy's lips tightened, but she stepped aside, gesturing toward a cluttered studio. Canvases leaned against every wall, some vibrant with color, others shrouded in cloth. A half-finished painting of a woman in a crimson dress dominated an easel, billed its brushstrokes, bold yet somehow mournful. The air was thick with the scent of oil paint and linseed oil, and a single candle flickered on a table strewn with brushes and palettes. "Please, sit," Nancy said, indicating to mismatched chairs. She perched on a stool, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I heard about the murders. Dreadful business. But I don't see how I can help." Poirot settled into a chair, his posture as precise as ever. "Mademoiselle, you were seen leaving. Pobloxum Hotel on the night of the murders. A porter described a woman with your distinctive presence. You wore a dark green coat, Nan, and you appeared, shall we say, agitated. Nancy's fingers twitched, but her expression remained composed. I was at the Bloxham, yes. I often meet patrons, they're wealthy sorts, who commission portraits. It's a convenient place, discreet. But I left well before any unpleasantness occurred. Convenient, you say, Poirot mused, his voice soft but probing. And yet 3 people were found dead, each with a cufflink in their mouth, marked with the initials PJI. A curious detail, would you not agree? Tell me, Mademoiselle Duquesne, do you know of anyone with those initials? Nancy's gaze flickered to the candle, its flame dancing in her eyes. PJI? No, I'm afraid I don't. It sounds like something from a Gothic novel, not real life. She forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Catchpool shifted uncomfortably. Miss Duquesne, we've learned that the victims Harriet Sipple, Ida Gransbury, and Richard Negus were connected to a tragedy in Great Holling 16 years ago. A vicar named Patrick Ives and his wife, Frances, died under suspicious circumstances. You're from Great Holling, aren't you? Nancy's smile vanished. She stood abruptly, crossing to a small window and staring out into the fog. I left Great Holling when I was young, she said, her voice low. It's a place of small minds and smaller hearts. I haven't been back in years. And yet, Poirot said, leaning forward, the past. It has a way of following us. None Patrick Ives, for example. A name that stirs memories. Perhaps you knew him, did you not? Nancy turned, her face pale but defiant. Yes, I knew Patrick. Everyone in Great Holling did. He was a kind man, a good vicar. What happened to him and Frances was a tragedy, but it's ancient history. Why drag it up now? Because, Mademoiselle Poirot, said his tone sharpening, the dead at the Bloxham Hotel were no strangers to that tragedy. Harriet Sipple spread vicious rumors about Patrick Ives. Ida Gransbury and Richard Negus supported her claims. And now they are dead, with cufflinks that may point to the very man they wronged. Be worth at the hotel that night. You knew Patrick Ives, and you, I think, are not telling us all you know. Nancy's hands clenched into fists. You're accusing me of something, Mr. Poirot, but you're dancing around it. If you think I killed those people, say it outright. Catchpool cleared his throat, eager to diffuse the tension. We're not accusing you, Miss Duquesne. We're trying to understand. You were seen leaving the hotel in a hurry. If you were meeting a patron, why the rush? And why not come forward when you heard about the murders? Nancy hesitated, then sank back onto her stool. I didn't want to get involved. The Bloxham is a place of discretion, as I said. My patron that night he's married, and his wife wouldn't take kindly to our meetings, even if they're just for art. I left quickly because I didn't want to be seen by anyone who might gossip. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This patron, his name, Logie Alistair, Nancy said reluctantly. He's a collector, nothing more. He was commissioning a portrait for his daughter's engagement. We met in the hotel's lounge, and I left around 8 o'clock. You can ask him yourself. And yet, Poirot said, a porter saw you near the victim's rooms, not in the lounge. A curious discrepancy, none. Nancy's cheeks flushed. The porter's mistaken. Nowhere near those rooms. I don't even know where they were. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. Let us speak of keys, mademoiselle. Constable Stanley Beer, a diligent young man, found a pair of keys near the crime scenes. They match the rooms of two victims, Harriet Sipple and Ida Gransbury. Keys, you see, are small things, easily dropped, easily overlooked, but they unlock much. Did you, perhaps, drop something that night? Nancy's eyes widened, but she shook, hurt vehemently. I dropped nothing. I had no keys, no reason to be near those rooms. You're trying to trap me, Mr. Poirot, but I'm not your killer. Perhaps not, Poirot said softly, but you are hiding something. The truth, mademoiselle, is like a painting. It requires layers, patience, to reveal its form. You loved Patrick Ives, did you not? The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Nancy froze, her breath catching. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hiss of the candle. Then, slowly, she nodded. Yes, she whispered. I loved him, not as a lover, but as a friend, a confidant. He was different. He saw the world through kinder eyes than most. When those rumors started, Harriet's lies about him, and Francis I tried to defend him, but no one listened. Great Holling turned on them, and I couldn't stop it. Catchpool leaned forward, his notepad forgotten. Why didn't you tell us this from the start? If you cared for Ives, surely you'd want to help us find out who killed those responsible for his downfall. Nancy's eyes glistened with tears. Because it hurts, she said, her voice breaking. Because every time I think of Patrick and Francis, I see their faces, their pain. I left Great Harling to escape that guilt, that failure. And now you're telling me the people who destroyed them are dead, and you think I had something to do with it. I didn't. I swear it. Poirot's expression softened, but his gaze remained piercing. Mademoiselle, I believe you did not wield the weapon, but you know more than you say. You were at the Bloxham to meet someone. Yes, but not Lord Wren. You were there to see Richard Negus, were you not? Nancy's gasp was audible. How did you, Simple? Poirot said, tapping his temple. Fleet little grey cells. They arrange the facts. Richard Negus, unlike Harriet Sipple and Ida Gransbury, was not a cruel man. He followed Harriet's lead in Great Harling. Yes, but he was not the instigator. You knew him, perhaps better, than the others. You went to the Bloxham to confront him, to seek answers about the past. And when you left, you were agitated because the truth, it was not what you expected. Nancy covered her face with her hands. You're right, she admitted at last. I went to see Richard. He wrote to me, out of the blue, a month ago. He said he was sorry for what happened in Great Holling, for his part in the rumors. He wanted to meet, to explain. I didn't trust him at first, but I was curious. So I went. And what did he tell you? Catchpool asked. his pencil poised. Nancy lowered her hands, her face a mask of anguish. He said he was haunted by what happened, that he'd been a coward, going along with Harriet's lies because he was afraid of her influence. He told me Patrick and Francis were innocent, that the rumors were baseless. He wanted my forgiveness, but I couldn't give it. Not fully. I left angry, confused. But I didn't kill him, Mr. Poirot. I didn't kill anyone. Poirot nodded slowly. And this meeting, it took place in the lounge. No, Nancy admitted, in his room. Room 317. But I swear, he was alive when I left. I didn't see Harriet or Ida, and I didn't have any keys. Catchpool scribbled furiously, his mind racing. Room 317, Richard Negus's room. That places you at the scene. Miss Duquesne, you're sure you didn't see anything unusual? Anyone else in the corridor? Nancy shook her head. It was quiet. I left through a side entrance to avoid attention. That's all I know. Poirot rose, adjusting his hat with a precise flick. Mercy, Mademoiselle Duquesne. Your candor, though belated, is appreciated. But I must warn you, do not leave London. The truth, it is like a canvas half-painted. We will return to complete the picture. As they stepped back into the fog, Catchpool felt a chill that had little to do with the weather. Do you believe her, Poirot? She's admitted to being in Negus's room. But her alibi, it holds, doesn't it? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Her alibi. It is like a painting with a flaw crack beneath the surface. She speaks truth, but not all of it. The keys, Catchpool, the keys. They were found near the rooms of Sipple and Gransbury, not Negus. Why, and why was Nancy so quick to deny dropping them? Nan, there is another player in this game, one who moves. Be in the shadows. They walked on, the fog swallowing their footsteps. Catchpool's mind churned with questions, but one stood out. If Nancy wasn't the killer, who was? And why did the spectre of Patrick Ives loom so large over this bloody affair? The studious candlelight faded behind them, but Poirot's resolve burned brighter. The artist's alibi, fragile as it was, had shifted the puzzle's pieces. Somewhere in the fog, the truth waited, and Hercule Poirot would not rest until it was his. The next morning. The air in Poirot's boarding-house was thick with the scent. A strong coffee and the faint tang of ink from Catchpool's ever-present notepad. Poirot sat at the breakfast table, his fingers drumming a precise rhythm on the polished wood. Catchpool, he said, we must consider the keys. They are not mere objects. They are symbols, clues to the killer's mind. Catchpool, nursing a headache from too little sleep, frowned. Symbols, they're just keys, Poirot. Someone dropped them, likely the killer, to access the rooms. None, Poirot said, waving a hand. You think too literally, and me. The keys were found near the rooms of Sipple and Gransbury, yet Nancy Duquesne was in Negus's room. If she is not the killer, and I am inclined to believe her, for now then someone else placed those keys, someone who wished to be seen, or perhaps not seen. A paradox, oui. Catchpool rubbed his temples. "You're saying the keys were planted?" "Precisement," Poirot said. "But by whom, and why?" "We must return to the Bloxam. Speak again with Luca Lazari. His theatricality, it conceals a keen observer. He may have seen more than he admits." The Bloxam Hotel was as opulent as ever, its marble floors gleaming under crystal chandeliers. Luca Lazari greeted them with his usual flourish, his arms wide as if embracing the world. "Signor Poirot, Inspector Catchpool, my hotel. She weeps for the tragedy, but she welcomes you back. How may I assist?" Poirot's smile was polite but sharp. "Monsieur Lazari, you are a man who sees much." "Yes. On the night of the murders, you were in the lobby, overseeing your guests. Did you see Nancy Decane, the artist, enter or leave room 317? Lazari's eyes twinkled, but his expression grew cautious. "The artist Esty, I saw her briefly in the lounge earlier that evening. She was with a gentleman, not Lord Wren, as she claimed, but another, tall, nervous, with a scar on his left cheek. They spoke quietly. Then she left. I did not see her near room 317, but the hotel. She is a labyrinth." "No." Poirot's moustache quivered. "A scar, you say? Most interesting. And this gentleman, did he remain after Mademoiselle Decane departed?" Lazari shrugged. "He vanished like a ghost. I was busy with other guests. But I tell you, Signor Poirot, my staff, they see things. One of my porters, young Thomas, mentioned a man with a scar near the 3rd floor that night. Perhaps the same." Catchpool's pencil scratched furiously. "A man with a scar? That's new. Poirot, could this be our killer?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his voice low. "But we must not leap, Catchpool. We climb the ladder of logic, step by step. Monsieur Lazari, these keys," he produced a small sketch of the keys found by Constable Beer. "Have you seen their like before? Perhaps among your staff's possessions?" Lazari studied the sketch, his brow furrowing. "These are not our standard keys. The Bloxam's keys are engraved with our crest. They are plain, unremarkable. But I will ask my staff. If they know anything, you shall know it too." As they left the hotel, Poirot's pace slowed, his eyes distant. "A man with a scar," he murmured. "A nervous gentleman, seen with Nancy Decane, seen near the 3rd floor, and keys that do not belong. The puzzle, it grows clearer, yet more complex." Catchpool's frustration bubbled over. "Clearer, Poirot. Where?" "Chasing shadows. Nancy's story checks out. She was in Negus's room, not Sybil's or Grunsbury's. The keys don't connect to her. And now this scarred man, who is he? Another suspect, or just a red herring?" Poirot stopped, turning to face Catchpool. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it is like a melody. At first, the notes seem scattered, discordant, but listen closely. And the harmony emerges. This man with the scar, he is a note we must follow. And Nancy Decane, her alibi holds. Yes, but it is not the full song. We must find this man, and we must find Jenny Hobbs. For I fear, Catchpool, that the killer's score is not yet complete." The search for the scarred man led them to a dingy pub in Whitechapel, where whispers of a mysterious figure matching Losery's description had surfaced. The pub, the Blackened Anchor, was a far cry from the Bloxham's grandeur, its air thick with smoke and the sour tang of ale. Poirot, looking distinctly out of place in his pristine suit, navigated the crowd with the grace of a diplomat in a war zone. Catchpool, more at ease in the rough setting, scanned the room for their quarry. At a corner table, a man sat alone, his face half hidden by a pint glass. A jagged scar ran from his left cheek to his jaw, glinting faintly in the dim light. Poirot approached, his cane tapping lightly. "Monsieur," he said, his voice cutting through the pub's din, "may we join you?" The man's eyes flicked up, wary but curious. "Depends on who's asking," he said, his voice rough with a faint Devonshire lilt. "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Inspector Catchpool. We seek information about the Bloxham Hotel and a certain night 3 days ago." The man's grip tightened on his glass. "Don't know nothing about no hotel. I'm just a bloke having a drink." "Indeed," Poirot said, sliding into the seat opposite. "And yet you were seen there with Mademoiselle Nancy Duquesne. A woman, I think, you know well. Tell me, monsieur, what is your name, and what business did you have at the Bloxham?" The man hesitated, then leaned back, his scar catching the light. "Name's Samuel Kidd," he said at last. "I knew Nancy years ago in Great Harling. She's an old friend. I was in London, heard she was meeting someone at the Bloxham. So I dropped by. That's all." Catchpool's heart raced. Samuel Kidd, Jenny Hobbs's former fiancée, mentioned in whispers from Great Harling. "You were engaged to Jenny Hobbs," he said, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "And you knew Patrick Ives. What were you doing with Nancy Duquesne that night?" Kidd's jaw tightened. "I ain't saying more without a reason. You got no proof I did anything wrong." Poirot's smile was thin. "Proof, Monsieur Kidd, is what I seek. But consider this. 3 people are dead, their mouths stuffed with cufflinks marked P.J.I. Patrick James Ives, perhaps. You knew him. You loved Jenny Hobbs, who also knew him. And you were at the Bloxham, near the scene of the crime. Speak, or the noose of suspicion tightens." Kidd's eyes darted to the door, but he stayed put. "All right," he said, his voice low. "I was there with Nancy. She asked me to come, said she needed to talk about Patrick. She was meeting Negus, like you probably know. I waited in the lounge, kept an eye out. Nancy was upset when she left, said Negus was spouting nonsense about forgiveness. I followed her out, made sure she was safe. That's it. And the keys?" Poirot pressed. "Did you see anyone with keys like these?" He showed Kidd the sketch. Kidd shook his head. "Never seen 'em. Look, I ain't your man. I cared 'bout Patrick, yeah, and I hated what Harriet and her lot did to him, but I didn't kill nobody." Poirot studied him, his gaze unrelenting. "We shall see, Monsieur Kidd. But know this, Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is laid bare. If you hide anything, I will find it." As they left the pub, Catchpool's mind was a whirl. "Samuel Kidd," he said. "He's connected to Jenny, to Nancy, to Ives. But where does he fit? And those Keyswy, don't they match the hotels?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the gaslight. "The keys, Catchpool, are the key. They were placed to be found, to point us somewhere or away from somewhere. Kidd, he is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole. We must find Jenny Hobbs, for she is the heart of this mystery. And I fear, mon ami, that time is not our friend." The chapter closed with Poirot and Catchpool returning to the fog-draped streets. The weight of new questions pressing heavily. Nancy Duquesne's alibi held, but only just. Her connection to Patrick Ives and Richard Negus, a thread that tangled rather than clarified. Samuel Kidd's appearance added a new layer, his scarred face and guarded words hinting at deeper involvement. And always the spectre of Jenny Hobbs loomed, her cryptic warning at Pleasant's coffee house, echoing in Poirot's mind. "Don't try to find my killer. My death will serve justice." The little grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of a case that was as much about guilt and redemption as it was about murder. The Bloxham Hotel, with its monogrammed cufflinks and misplaced keys, was a stage, and Poirot was determined to unmask the director before the final act. Chapter 7. The fourth cufflink fog clung to London's streets like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant hum of gas lamps. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable coat buttoned against the damp, strode purposefully through Bloomsbury, his cane tapping a sharp rhythm on the cobblestones. Beside him, Edward Catchpool, his young Scotland Yard companion, struggled to match the Belgian detective's brisk pace, his face a storm of frustration and awe. The Bloxham Hotel loomed ahead, its grand facade a silent witness to the grim tableau within a triple murder. 3 monogrammed cufflinks, and now a new and chilling clue that threatened to unravel everything. Inside the hotel's opulent lobby felt stifling, the air heavy with the scent of polished wood and whispered secrets. Luca Losery, the hotel's flamboyant owner, greeted them with his usual theatrical flourish, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Catchpool," he said, bowing slightly. "The police have cordoned off the second floor again. A most distressing discovery, I'm told." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his mind at work. "De-stressing, oui, but also illuminating, Monsieur Losery. Take us to the scene, if you please." They ascended the grand staircase, the crimson carpet swallowing their footsteps. Constable Stanley Beer, a stocky man with a perpetually furrowed brow, awaited them outside room 402. His face was pale, his voice tight. "It's not like the others, sir," he said to Catchpool, then glanced at Poirot. "It's worse, somehow." The room was a stark contrast to the pristine crime scenes of Harriet Sipple, Ida Gransbury, and Richard Negus, where those had been eerily orderly bodies, arranged with ceremonial precision. Cufflinks, placed with deliberate care, this scene was chaos. Peel of blood, still glistening, spread across the hardwood floor near the window. A woman's hat, navy blue with a delicate lace trim, lay crumpled beside it, and in the center of the blood, glinting like a malevolent eye, was a fourth cufflink. Its PJI monogram unmistakable. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers hovering over the cufflink without touching it. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his voice low but sharp. "The killer grows bold. Catchpool. This is no mere murder. Seen it is a message." Catchpool, his notebook trembling in his hand, swallowed hard. "Jenny Hobbs' hat," he said, recognizing it from Poirot's description of the frightened woman at Pleasant's coffee house. "Is she not here?" Poirot said, rising smoothly. "The absence of a body is as significant as its presence. This blood, this hat, this cufflink, they are a warning, a declaration of intent. Jenny is alive for now, but she is the next piece in this deadly game." Catchpool's frustration boiled over. "A game, Poirot. 3 people are dead, and now Jenny's life hangs by a thread. How can you be so calm? You keep dropping these cryptic hints, but I'm drowning in questions. What does this cufflink mean? Why, Jenny? And why here, in this room?" Poirot's green eyes glinted with a mix of patience and reproach. "Calmness, mon ami, is the lens through which we see clearly. Your questions are valid, but they are like scattered threads. We must weave them together. The cufflink, the blood, the hat, they are not random. They are the killer's signature, a flourish meant to taunt us. But in their arrogance, they reveal more than they intend." He turned to Constable Bayer. "The blood, has it been tested? Is it human?" Beer nodded grimly. "Preliminary tests say yes, sir, but there's not enough for a fatal wound. Whoever bled here walked away, was carried." Poirot's lips curved slightly. "Bean, then we have time, but not much. Catchpool, you will coordinate with the constables to search the hotel grounds. Bag every exit, every alley. Jenny may still be close. I will examine this room further." Catchpool hesitated, his jaw tight. "And what will you do, Poirot? Stare at the walls until they confess?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The walls, they do not speak, but they listen. Go, Catchpool. Trust Hercule Poirot." As Catchpool and Beer departed, Poirot turned his attention to the room, his senses attuned to every detail. The blood was fresh, no more than a few hours old, and its pattern suggested a deliberate spill, not a struggle. The hat, he noted, was not merely dropped but placed, its brim angled toward the cufflink, as if to draw the eye. He paced the room, his cane a metronome to his thoughts, and stopped at the window. A faint smudge on the sill caught his attention, a trace of wax, as if a candle had been rested there briefly. "Curio," he muttered, "a candle in a room with electric lights. Why?" He moved to the bedside table, where a single drawer paled a curious find, a torn piece of paper, no larger than a matchbook, with a single word scrawled in hasty ink: "Vengeance." The handwriting was erratic, unlike the precise monograms of the cufflinks, suggesting panic or haste. Poirot tucked it into his pocket, his mind racing. Downstairs, Catchpool rallied the constables, his voice sharp with urgency. "Fan out. Check the service entrances. the courtyard, even the bloody rooftops if you have to. Jenny Hobbs is out there, and she's in danger. As the constables dispersed, Catchpool's thoughts churned. Poirot's methods, his maddening confidence, his refusal to explain grated on him. Yet he couldn't deny the man's genius. The cufflinks, the blood, Jenny's hatchet, all felt like a puzzle designed to mock them. He glanced back at the hotel, its windows glowing like eyes in the fog, and shivered. Meanwhile, Poirot descended to the lobby, seeking Luca Lawsery. The hotelier was behind the front desk, fussing over a ledger with exaggerated nonchalance. "Monsieur Lawsery," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild, "you have a remarkable memory for your guests. Tell me, have you seen a woman matching Jenny Hobbs' description, blonde, slight, perhaps distressed entering or leaving last night?" Le hand stilled, his flamboyance faltering. "A woman. Oh, Monsieur Poirot, so many come and go. But perhaps there was one late last evening, hurrying through the side entrance. She wore a hat like the one you described, but her face hidden, you see, by a scarf." Poirot's eyes narrowed. A scarf in this weather? And where did she go? Lawsery shrugged a touch too quickly. "Out, I presume. Toward the gardens. Perhaps I was busy, you understand." "Busy," Poirot repeated, his voice soft but cutting. "Yet you notice a scarf. Most interesting. Mercy, Monsieur Lawsery." Poirot stepped outside, the fog thicker now, curling around the hotel's manicured gardens. The side entrance, less grand than the main doors, led to a narrow path flanked by his keen eyes scanned the ground, and there, half buried in the gravel, he found it a pearl earring, small but distinctive, its luster dulled by dirt, Jenny's or another player's. Back inside, Poirot sought the hotel's night porter, a wiry man named Thomas Brignell, whose nervous fidgeting betrayed more than he intended. "Monsieur Brignell," Poirot began, "you were on duty last night. Did you see a woman, perhaps with a scarf, near the side entrance?" Brignell's eyes darted to the floor. "I might have, sir. She was quick, like a ghost. Didn't stop to chat. Went toward the service stairs, I think." "And you did not follow?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his gaze was steel. Brignell flushed. "No, sir. I had duties. The hotel was busy, what with everything." Poirot nodded, dismissing him, but his mind catalogued the porter's unease. The service stairs led to the second floor near room 402. A pattern was emerging, but it was incomplete, like a melody missing its final note. Catchpool returned, breathless, his coat damp from the fog. "Nothing," he reported. "No sign of Jenny in the gardens or the streets nearby. The constables are still searching, but it's like she vanished." "She has not vanished," Poirot said firmly. "She is hidden, Catchpool, and the killer wishes us to believe she is lost." But this, he held up the torn paper with vengeance scrawled on it. "This tells us the killer's mind. Seek retribution, but for what? And why Jenny?" Catchpool frowned, studying the paper. Vengeance could mean anything. A jilted lover, a family feud, a business deal gone sour. How do we narrow it down? By returning to the beginning, Poirot said. Jenny's warning at the coffee house, she spoke of her death serving justice. She knows something. Catchpool. Something that ties her to Harriet Sipple, Ida Gransbury, and Richard Negus. The cufflinks, the blood, the hat. They are symbols, yes, but also distractions. The killer wishes us to chase shadows while they prepare. The next act, Catchpool's frustration flared again. So what do we do? Wait for another body to turn up? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Nan, mon ami. We act. We find Jenny Hobbs before the killer does. You will return to Scotland Yard and request a list of all guests who checked into the Bloxham in the past week, particularly those with connections to Great Holling. I will visit Fee Spring at Pleasance Coffee House. She saw Jenny last, and her memory may hold the key to Jenny's path. Catchpool hesitated, then nodded. Fine, but Poirot, if you find something and don't tell me, you will know all in time. Poirot interrupted, his voice soothing but firm. Trust Hercule Poirot. The little grey cells, they are working. As they parted, the fog seemed to thicken, wrapping the Bloxham in an eerie shroud. Poirot's mind, however, was clear. Each clue a thread in a tapestry he was determined to unravel. Jenny Hobbs was out there, alive but hunted, and the fourth cufflink was a promise. Death yet to come. He would find her, he vowed, before the killer's curtain fell. At Pleasance Coffee House, the air was warm with the scent of roasted beans and fresh scones. Fee Spring, the nonsense proprietress, wiped her hands on her apron as Poirot entered, his presence drawing curious glances from the evening crowd. Back again, are you? She said, her voice sharp but not unkind. What's it now, Mr. Poirot? That frightened lass still on your mind? Oui, Madame Spring, Poirot said, settling at a corner table. Jenny Hobbs, you saw her last. Fleeing into the night. Tell me, what else do you recall? A word, a gesture, anything that struck you as unusual. Fee leaned against the counter, her eyes narrowing as she thought. She was scared, that's certain. Kept glancing at the door, like she expected someone to burst in. Said something odd, though it's not just me, it's all of us. Didn't make sense at the time, but it stuck with me. Poirot's fingers steepled. All of us. Most intriguing. Did she carry anything? A bag, perhaps. Fee nodded slowly. A small clutch, navy blue, matched her hat. She clutched it like her life depended on it. Dropped it once, and I saw something fall out a key, I think, but she snatched it up quick. A key, Poirot repeated, his mind flashing to the dropped key at the Bloxham. Merci, Madame Spring. You have been most helpful. As he left the coffee house, the fog had lifted slightly, revealing a city alive with secrets. The key, the cufflink, the blood, the word vengeance. They were pieces of a puzzle that pointed not just to Jenny, but to a deeper wound, one that festered in the shadows of Great Holling. Poirot's resolve hardened. He would find Jenny Hobbs, and he would stop the killer before the fourth cufflink claimed its price. The night deepened. and at Scotland Yard Catchpool pored over guest lists, his eyes burning with fatigue. A name caught his attention: Samuel Kidd, a guest who had checked into the Bloxham 2 days before the murders and left abruptly the morning after. Kidd's address was listed as Great Holling, and a note in the margin mentioned a prior engagement to a Miss Jenny Hobbs. Catchpool's pulse quickened. He scribbled a message for Poirot and dispatched a constable to deliver it. Meanwhile, Poirot stood outside the Bloxham, the pearl earring in his pocket, a silent question. The hotel's lights flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw a figure in a scarf dart across the garden path. His cane tapped once, decisively. "The game accelerates," he murmured. But Hercule Poirot is ready. The hunt was on, and the fourth cufflink's shadow loomed large. Chapter 8. The Jealous Betrayal. The London fog clung to the cobblestones like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant cry of a newsboy. Hercule Poirot adjusted his Homburg hat, its brim shielding his sharp eyes as he stood outside Pleasant's coffee house. The evening was damp, the air heavy with secrets, and Poirot's mind churned with the enigma of Jenny Hobbs. Her desperate words from days ago echoed in his thoughts. "I am doomed to die, and it is just." What had driven her to such fatalism? And how did her shadow connect to the grim tableau of the Bloxham Hotel murders? Inside the coffee house, the warmth of gaslight and the aroma of roasted beans offered a fleeting comfort. Poirot settled at a corner table, his gloved fingers tapping rhythmically on the polished wood. He had sent Edward Catchpool to Great Harling, trusting the young Scotland Yard inspector's diligence to unearth the villagers' buried truths. But Poirot's instincts, those infallible petites, Cellul's grises, whispered that Jenny's story held the key to the monogrammed cufflinks found in the victims' mouths. Harriet Sipple, Ida Gransbury, Richard Negasol, dead, all linked by those cryptic initials PJI, and now Jenny, a woman running from her own shadow, was entwined in their fate. The door swung open, admitting a gust of cold air and Fee Spring, the coffee house's spirited owner. Her auburn curls were tucked under a practical cap, but her eyes sparkled with the keen awareness of one who missed nothing. "Monsieur Poirot," she greeted, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're brooding again. Another cup to fuel those famous grey cells." Poirot's moustache twitched with a faint smile. "Oui, mademoiselle, but it is not coffee I seek tonight. Information. You'll recall Jenny Hobbs, the frightened woman who spoke with me here." Fee's brow furrowed, her hands pausing mid-motion. Hard to forget her, pale as a ghost, jumping at shadows. She was in here a few times before that night, always looking over her shoulder. Said something once about paying for sins. I thought she was just nervy, but now she trailed off, glancing toward the window as if expecting Jenny to materialize from the fog. Poirot leaned forward, his voice low but commanding. "What else, Mademoiselle Spring? Every detail, it matters." Fee hesitated, then leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. She mentioned a man once. Samuel, she called him, said he was her anchor, but the way she said it sounded more like a chain. And there was a name, she muttered, almost to herself. Patrick. I didn't catch more, but it stuck with me. She looked haunted. Samuel. Patrick. Poirot's eyes gleamed, filing the names away like pieces of a mosaic. And this Samuel, did she describe him? His profession? His demeanor? Fee shook her head. Nothing clear. Just said he was always there. Made my skin crawl. The way she said it, like he was watching her, even then. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Samuel, possibly Samuel Kidd, a name whispered in connection to Jenny's past. And Patrick. Could it be Patrick Ives, the vicar whose tragic story Catchpool was unraveling in Great Holling? The pieces were aligning, but the picture remained maddeningly incomplete. Mercy, Mademoiselle Spring. You have been most helpful. As Fee returned to her counter, Poirot sipped his coffee, the bitter warmth grounding his thoughts. Jenny's plea not to pursue her killer suggested guilt, but her fear pointed to a deeper wound. Was she a victim, a conspirator, or both? And how did her story intersect with the meticulously staged murders at the Bloxham? The next morning, Poirot's polished shoes clicked against the marble floors of the Bloxham Hotel. The lobby buzzed with hushed whispers, the staff still reeling. From the triple murder, Luca Losery, the hotel's flamboyant owner, greeted Poirot with a flourish, his silk cravat a splash of crimson against his tailored suit. Monsieur Poirot, the great detective returns to my humble establishment. Have you come to unravel the devilry that has tarnished my hotel's name? Humble is not the word I would choose, Monsieur Losery, Poirot replied, his tone dry. But I seek the truth. Tell me, have you recalled anything new about the night of the murders? A guest, perhaps, who seemed out of place? Losery's eyes narrowed, his theatrics giving way to a calculating glint. I told Inspector Catchpool all I knew, but there was one thing. A man, not a guest, lingering near the service entrance that night. Rough sort, broad shoulders, with a cap pulled low. I thought he was a deliverer man, but he vanished before I could ask. Poirot's fingers tightened around his cane. And this man, did he carry anything? A bag, perhaps, or an item of note? Losery tapped his chin. Now that you mention it, he had a small parcel, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string. I only glimpsed it before he slipped into the alley. A parcel. Poirot's mind flashed to the dropped key from the crime scene, the fourth cufflink, the pool of blood. Could this man be Samuel Kidd, delivering a piece of the killer's puzzle? Mercy, Monsieur Losery. You will inform me if this man returns. Nest si pas. Losery bowed extravagantly. But of course, Monsieur. My hotel is at your service. Leaving the lobby, Poirot ascended to the victim's rooms, now sealed by Scotland Yard. Constable Stanley Beer, a lanky officer with a nervous tic, stood guard. Monsieur Poirot, he said, saluting awkwardly. Inspector Catchpool said, you might come by. Nothing's been touched since the bodies were moved. Bon, Poirot murmured, stepping into Harriet Sippel's room. The air was stale, the bed still rumpled from her final night. He examined the spot where the cufflink had been found, lodged in her throat like a grim signature. The precision of the act each victim posed identically. Each cufflink placed with care spoke of a mind both methodical and vengeful. But why Jenny? Was she to be the fourth victim, or was she the architect of this macabre play? As Poirot paced, his thoughts returned to Fee's words. Samuel, Patrick. Jenny's past was unraveling, thread by thread. He recalled Catchpool telegram from Great Harling, mentioning a scandal involving Patrick Ives, a vicar accused of fraud, and his wife, Frances, driven to ruin by rumors. Harriet Sipple, one of the victims, had been a key accuser, her venomous tongue poisoning the Billy. Could Jenny have been complicit in that tragedy, her guilt now drawing a killer's wrath? That afternoon, Poirot ventured to a modest boarding-house in Camden, where Jenny had last been seen. The landlady, a dear woman named Mrs. Tate, eyed Pym suspiciously. Jenny Hobbs. She's gone, and good riddance, always sneaking about, paying late. Left 2 days ago. No word where Poirot's moustache quivered with interest. And did she have visitors, Madame Tate? A man, perhaps, named Samuel. Mrs. Tate's lips pursed. A man came round. Big fellow, dark hair, eyes like a hawk. Didn't give a name, but Jenny went white as a sheet when she saw him. They argued in her room. Couldn't make out the words, but she was crying when he left. And this argument, Poirot pressed. When did it occur? Night before she scuppered. Same night as those murders. Come to think of it, Mrs. Tate's eyes widened. You don't think she's mixed up in that, do you? Poirot offered. A placating smile. I think only of the truth, madame. Did Jenny leave anything behind? Mrs. Tate hesitated, then retrieved a small tin box from a cupboard. Just this. Found it under her bed after she left. Inside the box, Poirot found a faded photograph, a lock of dark hair, tied with ribbon, and a crumpled note in Jenny's handwriting. Forgive me, Patrick. I was weak. The photograph showed a younger Jenny, radiant and smiling, beside a man in a clerical collar. Patrick Ives, no doubt. The lock of hair was a keepsake, a relic of love or guilt. The note, though, was a confession, its brevity belying its weight. Mercy, Madame Tate, Poirot said, pocketing the items. You have advanced the cause of justice. Back at his flat, Poirot spread the clues across his desk. The photograph, the note, the lock of hair. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like his thoughts. Jenny's connection to Patrick Ives was undeniable, but her role in his downfall was murky. Had she loved him, only to betray him under pressure from Harriet Sipple's accusations? And Samuel Kidd, her anchor, her chain, what part did he play? Was he her protector, tormentor, or both? A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. It was Constable Beer, breathless and wide-eyed. Monsieur Poirot, we've had a sighting. Jenny Hobbs, at a tavern near the docks. She was with a man matches the description of that Samuel fellow. They looked agitated. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And where is this tavern, Constable? The Black Anchor, sir. Rough place, not her usual sort. Inspector Catchpool's on his way back from Great Harling, but I thought you'd want to know now. Tersbeen, Constable, you have done well." Poirot donned his coat, his mind alight with possibility. The black anchor-fitting stage for a confrontation. If Jenny was there with Samuel Kidd, the truth was within reach. The Black Anchor Tavern reeked of stale ale and desperation. The clienteled dock-workers, sailors, and petty thieves cast wary glances at Poirot's immaculate suit and gleaming cane. He scanned the dimly lit room, spotting Jenny at a corner table, her face half hidden by a shawl. Beside her sat a broad-shouldered man with a cap pulled, low. Samuel Kidd, no doubt. Their conversation was heated, Jenny's hands gesturing wildly, Kidd's voice a low growl. Poirot approached, his presence drawing their attention like a magnet. Jenny's eyes widened, her face paling. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice trembling, "you shouldn't be here." "And yet, mademoiselle." "Here I am," Poirot replied, his tone calm but unyielding. "You spoke of justice, of a death deserved. But I, Hercule Poirot, do not believe in justice served by murder. Tell me, who is this man, and what hold does he have over you?" Kidd's eyes flicked to Poirot, cold and assessing. "She don't need to answer to you, Frenchman. This is private business." Poirot's moustache curled with disdain. "Private, monsieur. 3 deaths at the Bloxham Hotel, a 4th cufflink, a pool of blood. These are not private matters. They are crimes, and I will see them solved." Jenny's hands shook as she clutched her shawl. "Samuel, please. He'll find out anyway. He always does." Kidd's jaw tightened, but he leaned back, his silence a grudging consent. Jenny took a ragged breath, her eyes darting to the photograph Poirot now held. "That's Patrick," she said, her voice breaking. "I loved him, Monsieur Poirot, more than anything, but I was weak. Harriet Sippleshe hated him, called him a fraud, a sinner. She turned the village against him, and I helped her." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. "You spread the rumors, mademoiselle. You destroyed Patrick Ives and his wife." Tears streamed down Jenny's face. "I didn't mean to. I was jealous. Patrick chose Francis, not me. Harriet fed my anger, twisted it into lies. I thought I was protecting him, exposing his flaws before someone else did. But it killed them both. Francis took her own life, and Patrick, he followed her. And the guilt," Poirot said softly, "it has haunted you ever since." Jenny nodded, her voice barely audible. "Samuel was my fiancé then. He stood by me, but he never forgave me for loving Patrick. When Harriet, Ida, and Richard were killed, I knew it was because of me. My sins brought this." Kidd slammed a fist on the table, making Jenny flinch. "Enough, Jenny. You don't owe him your soul." Poirot's eyes locked onto Kidd's. "And you, Monsieur Kidd, what is your role in this tragedy? Did you place the cufflinks, carve PJI into the victim's fates?" Kidd's laugh was bitter. "You think I'm the killer. I'm just trying to keep her alive. She's the one who thinks she deserves to die." Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragment. Jenny's guilt was the linchpin, her betrayal of Patrick Ives, the spark that ignited this chain of vengeance. But Kidd's defensiveness, his presence at the Bloxham, suggested a deeper involvement. Was he shielding Jenny, or manipulating her guilt for his own ends? Before Poirot could press further, a commotion erupted at the tavern's entrance. Constable Beer burst in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. "Monsieur Poirot, we've got word another cufflink found in an alley nearby, and blood, fresh blood." Jenny gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Kidd's eyes darkened, his hand inching toward his coat pocket. Poirot's cane snapped up, pointing at Kidd. "Do not move, monsieur. The game is not yet over, but it will be soon." The alley behind the Black Anchor was a grim tableau. A smear of blood on the cobblestones, a single cufflink glinting in the moonlight, its PJI initials mocking Poirot's pursuit. Jenny clung to Kidd, her fear palpable, while Poirot examined the scene. The blood was fresh, but there was no body yet. The cufflink was identical to the others, its placement deliberate, a taunt from the killer. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his mind whirling. "The killer plays with us, leaving breadcrumbs to a trap. But for whom? Jenny or another?" Kidd's voice was low, almost a growl. "You're wasting time, Poirot. Jenny's the target. You heard Hershey thinks she's next." Poirot turned to Jenny, his eyes piercing. "Mademoiselle, you must tell me everything. No more secrets. Who else knows of your part in Patrick Ives' ruin? Who seeks to punish you?" Jenny's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the distant wail of a foghorn. "I don't know. I thought it was Samuel, but he swore he'd protect me. There's someone else, someone who knows what I did, who wants me to suffer like they did." Poirot's thoughts crystallized. The murders were not random. They were a reckoning, a carefully orchestrated punishment for Great Holling's sins. Jenny's betrayal had set the stage, but the killer was someone else, someone with a vendetta, a mastermind hiding in plain sight. Samuel Kidd was a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. "Constable Beer," Poirot said, his voice commanding, "take Mademoiselle Hobbs to safety. Monsieur Kidd, you will come with me to Scotland Yard. We have much to discuss." Kidd's eyes flashed, but he nodded, his defiance tempered by the weight of Poirot's gaze. Jenny was led away, her shawl trailing like a ghost in the fog. Poirot stood alone in the alley, the cufflink in his gloved hand, its cold metal, a challenge to his intellect. At Scotland Yard, Poirot faced Kidd across a stark interrogation room. The man's broad frame filled the chair, his eyes unyielding but wary. "You think I'm your man, Poirot," Kidd said, his voice rough. "I'm no killer. I've been cleaning up Jenny's messes for years, but I didn't touch those people." At the Bloxham, Poirot leaned forward, his voice velvet over steel. "Then tell me, Monsieur Kidd, why were you at the hotel that night? By the parcel, the secrecy, and why does Jenny fear you as much as she fears her own death?" Kidd's hands clenched, his knuckles whitening. "I was there to meet someone. A man who said he knew about Jenny's past, about Great Holling. He wanted money to keep quiet. I brought the parcel cash, nothing more, but he never showed. A blackmailer, Poirot mused, his eyes narrowing. And this man, did he give a name? Kidd shook his head. Just a note, signed with those initials PJI. I thought it was a trick, but Jenny was terrified. Said it was Patrick's ghost, come for her. Poirot's moustache twitched. PJI, again, the thread that tied every clue together. But was it truly Patrick Ives' initials, or a clever misdirection? The blackmailer, the cufflinks, the murders all pointed to a mind that thrived on manipulation, weaving a web of guilt and fear. Mercy, Monsieur Kidd, Poirot said, rising. You have given me much to consider. But know this, Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is laid bare. As dawn broke over London, Poirot sat in his flat, the photograph of Jenny and Patrick Ives before him. The lock of hair, the note, the cuffling soul whispered of a tragedy rooted in love and betrayal. Jenny's jealousy had fueled Harriet Sippel's crusade, destroying Patrick and Francis Ives. Now, someone was using that guilt to orchestrate a deadly revenge, with Jenny as the final act. But who? Samuel Kidd was a suspect, but his story rang true to Blunt, too raw to be a lie. The blackmailer, the man behind PJI, was the key. And Poirot's petites cellules grises were closing in, the puzzle's edges sharpening. He penned a telegram. To Catchpool, still in Great Holling. Return at once. Jenny found, but danger remains. Seek Margaret Ernst, Dr. Flower Daney, who knew Ives' enemies. The killer hides among them. Poirot leaned back, his eyes glinting with resolve. The jealous betrayal that had shattered Jenny's life was the heart of this case. But the mind behind the murders was colder, more calculating. The stage was set, the players assembled. Hercule Poirot would not rest until the curtain fell on the truth, resolution. Jenny's motives clarify, but her whereabouts remain elusive, spurring Poirot's urgency. Chapter 9. The Village Conspiracy. The train to Great Harling rattled through the English countryside. Its rhythmic clatter a counterpoint to Edward Catchpool's restless thoughts. The fields beyond the window blurred into a patchwork of green and gold, but his mind was fixed on the cryptic threads of the Bloxham Hotel murders. 3 bodies, 3 monogrammed cufflinks, and Jenny Hobbs' elusive shadow loomed large. Beside him, Hercule Poirot sat immaculate in his pinstriped suit, his moustache a perfect crescent, his eyes half closed, as if communing with some invisible muse. Catchpool envied that serene focus. His own nerves were frayed, his notebook a chaos of half-formed theories. Mon ami Poirot said, breaking the silence, you fidget like a schoolboy awaiting a scolding. Tell me what troubles you about Great Holling. Catchpool sighed, rubbing his temple. It's the weight of it all, Poirot. 3 murders, a village full of secrets, and Jenny Hobbs wherever she is tying it together. I feel we're chasing a ghost who knows more than we do. Poirot's lips twitched upward. A ghost, perhaps, but one who leaves footprints. The village, Catchpool, It is the heart of this puzzle. Great Holling holds the truth, and we shall pry it loose. The train lurched to a stop at a small, weathered platform. The sign, Great Holling, barely legible under peeling paint. The air was crisp, scented with damp earth and wood smoke. The village itself was a cluster of stone cottages, their slate roofs glistening from recent rain. A church spire pierced the sky, its shadow long and ominous. Catchpool felt a prickle of unease, as if the village itself were watching. Their first stop was the vicarage, a modest building beside the church, where Margaret Ernst, widow of the late Vicar Patrick Ives, resided. Poirot had insisted on meeting her, convinced her connection to the 1913 tragedy held answers. The door creaked open, revealing a woman in her late 50s, her silver hair pulled into a tight bun, her eyes sharp, bowery. She wore a black dress, a relic of mourning that seemed more habit than necessity. "Monsieur Poirot, Mr. Catchpool," she greeted, her voice cool but polite. "I've heard of the troubles at the Bloxham. I suppose you think they're tied to this village." Poirot inclined his head. "Madame Ernst, the past has a way of reaching into the present. The deaths of your husband and his wife, Frances. In 1913 there is a thread that connects them to our murders. Will you help us find it?" Margaret's lips tightened. "You're digging up old wounds, monsieur. But come in. I'll tell you what I can." The parlor was austere, its only warmth from a crackling fire. Margaret served tea, her movements precise, as if each gesture were a defense against intrusion. Catchpool opened his notebook, pen poised, while Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Tell us of Harriet Sipple," Poirot began. "She was one of the victims. And she lived here in 1913, during the time of your husband's tragedy." Margaret's cup paused halfway to her lips. "Harriet was a viper," she said flatly. "She spread lies about Patrick and Frances, claiming they were involved in some sordid affair. Her gossip turned the village against them. It drove them to their deaths," Catchpool scribbled, his pulse quickening. "And Ida Gransbury, Richard Negus, were they part of this?" Margaret's eyes flickered. Ida followed Harriet like a shadow, parroting her venom. Richard was quieter, but he didn't stop them. He was complicit in his way. They all were Harriet, Ida, and others who believed. The lies. Poirot's fingers steepled. And Jenny Hobbs. What was her role? Margaret hesitated, her gaze drifting to the fire. Jenny was young, impressionable. She loved Patrick, or thought she did. When the rumors started, she added, "Pure out of jealousy, perhaps." She regretted it later, but the damage was done. Catchpool exchanged a glance with Poirot. Jenny's connection to the victims was tightening, but her motives remained murky. Did anyone seek revenge for Patrick and Frances? Catchpool asked, someone who might still hold a grudge. Margaret's expression hardened. "You're asking if someone killed those three because of what happened 16 years ago? I don't know. But this village keeps its secrets close. You'd do better to ask Dr. Flowerday. He was here then, and he saw more than most." The mention of Dr. Flowerday sent a jolt through Catchpool. The doctor's name had surfaced in his earlier inquiries, a figure who'd treated Frances Ives before her death. Poirot rose, adjusting his gloves. "Mercy, Madame Ernst. You have been most illuminating. We shall visit the good doctor." As they stepped into the village square, the air felt heavier, the clouds lower. Catchpool noticed villagers glancing their way, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "They're hiding something," he muttered. Poirot nodded. "Oui, mon ami. A village is like a tapestry pool. One thread, and the whole may unravel. Let us find Dr. Flowerday." The doctor's cottage was at the village's edge, its garden overgrown with brambles. Dr. Ambrose Flowerday was a wiry man in his 60s, with a shock of white hair and eyes that seemed to see too much. He welcomed them into a cluttered study, shelves groaning with medical texts and jars of preserved specimens. "Monsieur Poirot, I've read of your exploits," Flowerday said, his tone cautious. "I suppose you're here about the Bloxham murders. You think they're tied to Patrick and Frances Ives?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "You are perceptive, Doctor. Tell me, what do you recall of 1913? The rumors, the deaths, the villagers' role." Flowerday leaned back, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. "It was a dark time. Harriet Sipple started it all, claiming Patrick was unfaithful with a maid. Ida Gransbury fanned the flames, and soon half the village believed it. Jenny Hobbsy was heartbroken, in love with Patrick. She said things she shouldn't have, things that made it worse. And you," Poirot pressed, "what did you believe?" Flowerday's gaze dropped. "I knew Patrick and Frances. They were good people, caught in a storm of lies. I tried to help Frances when she fell ill-grief, mostly, I think, but the village turned on them. After their deaths, some of us, we made a pact." Pen froze. "A pact," Flowerday's voice lowered. "A few of us, myself, Margaret, a couple others, swore to protect the truth. Patrick and Frances were innocent. We kept evidence, letters, that proved it. But we also vowed never to let the village's shame be exposed. It would destroy too many lives." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And where are these letters now?" Flowerday hesitated, then rose, crossing to a locked cabinet. He retrieved a small bundle of papers, yellowed with age. "These," he said, handing them to Poirot. "They're from Patrick to Frances, written before their deaths. They show their love, their innocence. But they also name those who spread the lies: Harriet, Ida, Richard, and Jenny." Catchpool's heart raced as Poirot scanned the letters. "This is most significant," Poirot murmured. "But tell me, Doctor, who else knew of this pact?" Flowerday's face paled. "Only a few. Margaret, myself, and Samuel Kidd. He was Jenny's fiancé. Then he was furious about what happened to Patrick. He left the village after, but I heard he's back in London now." The name hit Catchpool like a thunderbolt. Samuel Kidd, Jenny's former fiancé, man whose shadow had hovered over the Bloxham Hotel. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you believe Monsieur Kidd capable of violence?" Flowerday's silence was answer enough. He looked away, his hands trembling. "I don't know. But if someone's killing those who wronged Patrick, Samuel would have reason. The walk back to the village square was tense, the weight of Flowerday's words settling over them. Catchpool, mind churned. Poirot. If kids behind this, why the cufflinks? Why the theatrics at the Bloxham? Poirot stopped, his cane tapping the ground. The cufflinks, mon ami, are a distraction, a flourish to mislead. But the murders, they are personal. Someone is punishing the guilty. And I suspect Samuel Kidd is not alone. There is a mastermind, someone who weaves this web with precision. As they reached the inn where they'd spend the night, a boy darted from an alley, thrusting a note into Catchpool's hand before vanishing. Catchpool unfolded it, his breath catching. The paper bore a single line in a jagged scrawl. The fourth, cufflink waits at the Bloxham. Find Jenny before it's too late. Poirot's eyes blazed. Mon Dieu, the game accelerates. We must return to London at once. The train back was a blur. Catchpool's thoughts tangled with names: Kidd, Jenny, the victims, and the spectre of a fourth cufflink. At the Bloxham, they found Constable Stanley Beer waiting, his face grim. We found something in the hotel's basement, he said. Blood, a Hutchins, we think, and another cufflink. Poirot's expression was unreadable. Then we are close, Mies Amos. The killer believes they control the board, but Hercule Poirot sees the moves they cannot. As they descended to the basement, the air grew cold, the scent of damp stone mingling, put something metallic. The pool of blood was small but stark. Jenny's hat crumpled beside it. The cufflink gleamed under a lantern, its PJI initials mocking them. Catchpool felt a chill. She's alive, isn't she? He whispered. For now, Poirot said. But the killer is bold, leaving this for us to find. They wish us to fear, to falter. But Poirot does not falter. Back in the hotel's lobby, Poirot gathered Luca, Lozery, and the staff, his voice commanding. Someone among you knows more than they say. A key was dropped, a note delivered. Speak now, or face the consequences of silence. A young maid, Clara, stepped forward, her hands wringing. I saw a man, she stammered, tall, dark-haired, leaving the basement 2 nights ago. He dropped a key. I didn't think anything of it until now. Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone was firm. Describe him, mademoiselle. Clara swallowed. He had a scar on his cheek, and he moved quickly, like he didn't want to be seen. I think he's staying at the inn across the street. Catchpool's pulse quickened. Samuel Kidd had a scar, he recalled from a witness statement. Poirot nodded, as if confirming a suspicion. Mercy, Clara, you have done well. The inn across the street was a dingy affair, its sign creaking in the wind. The innkeeper, a surly man named Grimsby, confirmed a guest matching Kidd's description. Pad checked in days ago. Keeps to himself, Grimsby muttered. Paid in cash, no questions. Poirot and Catchpool climbed the narrow stairs to Kidd's room, the wood groaning underfoot. The door was ajar, the room empty save for a single photograph on the table. Patrick and Francis Ives, smiling, oblivious to the tragedy awaiting them. Catchpool's stomach twisted. "He's gone," he said. Poirot picked up the photograph, his fingers tracing its edges. "Non, mon ami. He is close. This is his taunt, his challenge. Samuel Kidd wishes us to know he is the hunter, but he does not see that Hercule Poirot is the fox." As they left the inn, a scream pierced the night. Across the street, near the Bloxham's entrance, a figure staggered a woman, her coat torn, her face pale. Catchpool's heart leaped. Jenny. She collapsed before they reached her, her breath ragged. "They're coming," she gasped. "Samuel, he knows I'm here." Poirot knelt beside her, his voice steady. "Mademoiselle, you are safe now, but you must tell Usu is they." Jenny's eyes were wild, her words barely a whisper. "The pact. It wasn't just us. There's someone else, someone who planned it all. Samuel's just the blade." Catchpool's mind reeled. A mastermind, as Poirot had suspected. But who? As he helped Jenny to her feet, Poirot's gaze swept the street, his little grey cells working furiously. The village's secrets were unraveling, but the final piece remained just out of reach. The night closed in, the Bloxham Hotel looming like a sentinel. Catchpool knew they were racing against time, the fourth cufflink a ticking clock. Poirot, undeterred, murmured, "The truth is near, mon ami. We shall find it, and the killer will rue the day they challenged Hercule Poirot."